Hello everyone. By my watch, we're at 6:30. So bonne soirée à tous et bienvenue à cette audience en ligne du Comité de dérogation pour la ville d'Ottawa. Again, good evening and welcome to this online hearing by the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions under certain types of applications under the Planning Act. And the ones that most people are familiar with, of course, are the consent applications and the minor variances. But there are other types under the Planning Act that this committee is or does have jurisdiction to approve. So my name is Anne Tomley, and I will be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, and because it's the summer months, we're a little thinner than our usual 5 panelists, but this evening we have Mr. Scott Hindle and Ms. Kathleen Willis, so we do have quorum for this evening. Please take note that this is a video conference and it's being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with tonight's agenda on the city's webpage. So if you would like to go back and have a look at it later on, you are quite welcome to visit the city's website and re-watch if you're inclined to do so. So before we begin, there's a couple of notes that we really need to provide. First off, the Committee of Adjustments mandate is actually quite narrow in comparison to what Planning Committee for the City of Ottawa might be dealing with. The issues surrounding Development City are, as everyone knows, quite broad. The committee, however, can't, and these are the things that we are not able to consider as part of our discussions and our deliberations. And that would be any aspects of a proposal that's not related to the minor variances. So, for example, if there is a requirement for a height increase, we can talk about that. But if the minor variance for height increase is not required, in other words, the height of the proposal is in keeping with the zoning bylaw, then that's not an aspect that we can talk about. We also can't talk about any noise, pollution, property maintenance, or property values issues, prosecution for illegal construction, nor will we entertain any comments, personal comments about neighbors, agents, or applicants. Further, the committee cannot consider any additional variances or any material increases in the extent of relief required without proper public notice. There are some circumstances where the amendments are technical. And if they're technical, it means that it has no real material impact on the application. And sometimes we might amend an application because the relief required is actually less than what was posted on the notice. So in those cases, we can move forward with hearing the applications. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property and to file a statutory declaration confirming that the sign was posted. This declaration must be on file before we can hear an application. And I believe that we have a number of folks that have not had an opportunity to send in their statutory declarations. And in that case, we will be administering a solemn oath for the sign posting. So with respect to quorum, now we're only 3 this evening, so it always makes it a little bit more like higher probability that we could run into an issue. But that said, we haven't run into any technical issues so far, but should that happen and we lose quorum, then we will simply step down the items that have not been heard to the very next meeting of the committee. So in terms of the hearing process, you're all familiar with the agenda. There was one posted at the outset of the meeting. Those applications are essentially listed in the order that they were submitted. The committee can deal with applications in a different order, and we will be doing so this evening. Also note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing, and that written submissions received in support or in opposition have also been reviewed. And the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties even if you haven't provided any comments, or even if you haven't submitted your name for the speakers list, we can certainly hear from you this evening if you wish. The committee typically asks for a brief presentation by the applicant, unless the application is fairly straightforward, which we might simply then go to questions for clarification. The public submissions portion of the hearing is then opened to any interested parties. And what we typically do is start with the speakers that are on my speakers list, and then I'll open it up, as I said, to anyone else. And if for whatever reason you do want to participate and we don't have your name, then we will need your name and your full name, first and last. May need you to spell out your last for the record, and then we can move on with your municipal address, and then we'll hear your comments. When you're called upon to provide your comments, you can simply outline what your issues are and make sure that please you just address your questions to the panel members. Panel members then can ask some questions if we need further clarification about the nature of your concerns. The committee then, in terms of decisions, can make an oral decision this evening to either grant or deny an application. And the committee can also, by exception, choose to reserve its decision. Sometimes an application has sufficient complexity and new evidence is brought forward during the hearing that we can, in fact, simply adjourn the overall hearing for the evening, remain to further deliberate on the application, and then render a decision this evening. In all cases, the committee will issue within 10 days of the hearing a formal written decision outlining the panel's reasoning on the matter. And all decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which time the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. So before we get going with the agenda, I just need to know whether or not there are any conflicts of interest from the panel members with us tonight. Nope, looks like we have no conflicts of interest whatsoever. So the next order of business is adoption of the minutes of June 2nd. So do I have a motion to adopt? Yes, Ms. Willis, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Hindle. That's terrific. We're on, we're through that part. We don't have any adjournments on record for this evening, but I do want to call down, if at all possible, Ms. Doe on application 6 and 7 for 1764 Kingsdale Avenue. And I think we have, as the planner, Ms. Cully, if you can make yourself available as well.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Ms. Doe. So we've had a chance to look through the material, and what we're understanding is there seems to be still an inability by staff to really be able to confirm all of the particulars of the site to the zoning standards. So wondered whether or not, and in our materials, we don't seem to have a site plan from you. So is it, what we were thinking is maybe we could adjourn to the next meeting until we could have that plan submitted and full comments from our staff about the conformity of the proposal to the zoning standards.
If I could, through you, Madam Chair, respond to that. I actually, upon reading the staff report from Ms. Cully, I had sent her some additional information as well to provide some additional clarity on that. So I had provided her with an image that showed the survey diagram as well as a sketch of where, because it's in reference to the proposed driveway location for the existing parcel. So I had provided her with that sketch, and my understanding, and feel free to comment as well, Ms. Cully, is that she was satisfied that we could proceed and that they were not concerned that there would be any zoning conformity issues.
All right, Ms. Cully, I'd like to hear from you.
Yep, through you, Madam Chair, I can confirm what she has stated there. We did receive that information that indicates there would be enough space for the zoning compliance.
All right, so the sketch then, in your opinion, provides you with sufficient accuracy in order to, in fact, render your opinion that there is not any requirement for any further minor variances with regards to that?
Yes, that is correct, Madam Chair.
All right, in which case, And unless a committee member opposes, we're just going to step this down then to later on the agenda. And hear it? All right, thank you, Ms. Daewoo. Good to have that explanation.
Great, thank you.
All right, that said, we can move on with all of our applications at this point. So we've got a few that we can fast track. The first one is, in fact, application number 1 and 2 for 22 Rosalind. I believe I'm looking for Ms. McQuaig.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. Hope everyone's well.
Good evening, Ms. McQuaig. I understand we do not have a statutory declaration from you, so I'm going to have to read something to you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that finally that sign was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I affirm that to be true.
Great, perfect. So we're not looking for a presentation from you, Ms. McQuaig. We're going to go to questions, and then we do have some speakers registered for this evening.
Okay.
So the first thing I'd like to do, though, is in fact get a number of clarifications about the nature of the application. So let's do the easy stuff first. My understanding is that we're having to amend in the notice with regards to the area for both 22B and 22A. So rather than 441.2 square meters, we're amending that to 441 square meters. Is that correct?
441.1 square meters. I believe it was a rounding error.
0.1, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Okay, good. So if that's the case, I think the other issue that we need some clarity around is the consent requirement. Our understanding is, in fact, what you're looking for is partial discharge of the mortgage charge and not, in fact, a consent to create a new lot. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, if you're referring to the underlying lots as plan of subdivision indicated, as the lots were owned by a single owner, they would have merged on title. And so we are seeking a consent to ensure that those are severed appropriately.
And the lots, so there was 4 lots on a plan of subdivision, and you're saying that over time, those have not been retained as such and that they've merged and now we need a severance.
That I believe is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay.
They were owned by a single owner.
Yes, Ms. Willis.
My understanding, the way we've dealt with these in the past, is that if they're individual lots on a plan of subdivision, they do retain their own separate status. And so we've had several in the City View area that we have not done a severance as long as they respect the original lot lines.
Comments, Ms. McQuaig, and I guess I'm looking for Ms. Cully, maybe some clarification from Ms. Cully on this as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, our understanding of it was the consent was required because of the fact that there was actually no, not for the consent itself, but the consent is the responsibility of the applicant to determine if it is something that they require. That was something that we learned through speaking to committee staff. So they wanted to proceed with the consent.
All right, thank you, Ms.
Sorry, if I can provide some further additional information. In applications I've had in the past in consulting with legal counsel, whenever they have been those individual parcels, even though they're still showing as lots, if they've ended up under one PIN because they've been merged on title with a single landowner, then we have to resever them essentially. So that's my understanding, is that they do need a full severance as they've been under one property ownership and therefore they would have merged on title.
All right, so this would be an abundance of caution kind of approach in any event then. As well
Absolutely.
If a severance is in fact required, then I was going to make a comment about the conditions and the requirement for cash in lieu of parkland, where in the past what we've done is not require that in City View, much to the chagrin of the community association because the lots pre-existed. But in this case, if we are doing a severance and we're actually creating one additional lot, then I changed my mind about the imposition of the cash in lieu of parkland and feel that it does apply in this case.
Agreed, Ms. Willis. Okay, any other questions for Ms. McQuaid on either the consent application or the minor variance? All right, so we are definitely retaining the notice as is without any changes. So in other words, it is a consent as well as a partial discharge of the mortgage on title. All right, okay, so if we're done with our questions, then I can go to our speakers that are registered. I have Ms. Wilson and Ms. Pratt. Do we have Ms. Wilson or Ms. Pratt?
Hello, Madam Chair.
Hello, Ms. Wilson. How are you this evening?
It just takes a second to get in there. Thank you. I'm fine. I just want to say thank you to yourself and the committee for hearing us tonight. The only thing that we had to say about this one, and we've sent in our normal comments about the lots in City View and the lot area and the lot width. So that's our normal standard objection. But I'd like to confirm that what you just said is that that lot will be severed and that there will be cash in lieu from that lot.
Yes, Ms. Wilson, I think that's what we are doing this evening is we're actually conveying. And because we're conveying, it's being treated as if we are creating a new lot. And because we're creating a new lot, we can charge cash in lieu.
Okay. Okay. The other question I had was about the trees, and I don't know if Nancy Young is there tonight. I've tried to confirm this today with the tree people, but I haven't got any answer back. The trees that were on that property, there's only like the tree report shows one tree on that property that has to come down because it's in bad health because of the hydro. But in fact, when the property was sold, there was probably another 5 or 6 trees that were on that property that were taken down illegally. So I just wanted to ask, would there be more trees required if that was a proven fact to be put back onto the property?
So Ms. Young, I guess what we're looking from you is, how do you deal with these situations where at the time of application, they've already taken action with regards to the trees? What's our range of maneuver on this?
Sorry, was the question
through you, Madam Chair? In this, sorry, I think that question was for me, right?
The question's for Ms. Yes, it is.
Okay. So my understanding of this through looking at some of the details is it appears that the trees were removed prior to the new bylaw. And so before that time, I don't believe the trees would have been big enough to be covered under the new or under the old bylaw. So previously only trees greater than 50 centimeters would have been protected. And I believe that those trees were probably just kind of around the 30 centimeter mark. So there's really not much we can do in this case. I think what's done is done. And so we're asking that 3 trees be planted in place of the 1 city tree that needs to be removed. But I mean, any additional trees can be planted and would be recommended, but we can't really hold anyone to that.
All right, thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. McQuaig, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to concur with what Ms. Young had translated, that the trees would not have been subject to the old bylaw and they were removed before the new bylaw came into place. This would have been last year that they would have been removed. And with the rear yards that are being proposed, which actually exceed the minimum requirements in the bylaw, there's ample room on the property to, if the city tree cannot be retained and those 3 trees have to be put in place to replace that, there's also room on the property that if the owners want to plant additional trees beyond those 3, there's plenty of room to do that as well.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaig. All right, Ms. Wilson, any further comments or questions?
No, that was it. My comments about the trees, and just so everybody's clear, the trees that were across the back of that property were huge trees that were taken down. The ones on the side might have not passed the 50-centimeter mark, but the big trees in the back along the schoolyard were big trees. So anyway, it would be nice if the new owners would put some new trees back in, because they took down a lot of trees and left one that was already damaged by hydro, and to hide the fact that the other ones were gone. Anyway, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for everything, and that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson.
And Jill, I think Ms. Prout is away tonight. Ms. Prout.
Okay, all right, thank you for that, because that was going to be my next question, so thanks for anticipating that.
You can ask her, but I think she's away.
All right, so I will make a call. Is Ms. Pratt available for to present to the committee this evening?
Madam Chair, she is not online.
Not online. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, that said then, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak either for or against this application, the consent application or the minor variance application? All right, I'm not seeing anybody, so I think it's time for a vote. Committee, so all those in favor of the severance application? All right, so for the record, the consent application is granted unanimously. And on the minor variance application, all those in favor? All right, okay. Again, for the record, the minor variance application is unanimously approved. Ms. McQuaig, you're aware there's a number of conditions?
Yes, I've reviewed the conditions.
All right,
Madam Chair.
okay.
Thank you.
If that's the case, then we have no further issues with this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And enjoy your summer.
Take care.
Bye now. Okay, we're going to go on to the next application, which is actually item number 3, 2253 Frank Bender Street. And I'm looking for Mr. Budzik.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Budzik. So I think what we have before us this evening is a much revised application from what was originally proposed. So we're going to go through that. I'm going to have to go through all of the amendments to the notice. Before we do any of that, though, it would appear that I need to read something to you. So just a minute, let me, all right. So do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies, secondly, for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and lastly, that the sign was clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I affirm this to be true.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's make all the changes to the application. I'm going to go through this and ask you to confirm when I'm done. If there's any corrections, stop me and we'll talk through them. So, okay, so with the legal descriptions, we're changing it to part of lot 23, registrars complied plan 905, parts 42 and 49, RP 5R-13966.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Perfect. We're now also saying that in terms of the synopsis or the purpose of the application, the owner wants to subdivide his property now into 2 separate parcels of land in order to create 1 new lot for future development and of a detached dwelling. So we're not talking about 3, we're talking about 1 new lot for future development for 1 attached dwelling. We're striking with one dwelling on each of the newly created lots. The existing detached dwelling, garage, and sheds will be retained.
Through you, Madam Chair, there is one correction there.
Okay.
The development application does not propose necessarily the development or the future development of a detached dwelling on the lot. It simply seeks to create the lot for future residential purposes. The permitted dwellings include detached, single detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings. At this point, we are simply seeking to create a lot that will be developed under the provisions of the R2 zoning accordingly.
All right, so Ms. Ramirez, I'm going to suggest something, and if you don't agree with me, I need you then to tell me that you're what corrections you're looking for. So rather than in the first sentence, we would go with the owner wants to subdivide its property into 2 separate parcels of land in order to create 1 new lot for future development. Period. We're striking the rest of the sentence. Does that work for you?
Okay.
Okay. And then the existing dwelling, detached dwelling, garage, and sheds will be retained. So the owner wants to, and this is an added piece here, Mr. Budzik. The owner wants to proceed with a phased development to retain the existing dwelling and has requested that application D-08-01-21/B-00169 and D-08-0170 be adjourned sine die.
That is correct, Madam Chair. The developer at this time sees no reason to take down the existing detached bungalow and displace its existing tenants if they're not ready to proceed with development on those lots. So the intent is to develop on the newly created parcel and then proceed with applications 169 and 170 at a later date when they are ready to proceed with the demolition and new construction.
All right, so moving on to there's still more. So now in the box where consent is required for the following, we are saying that it's still the property shown as parts 1 to 6 on the draft 4R plan filed with the applications. We're going to retain B00168 for frontage on Frank Bender. And I believe we're going to retain that entire first line, but we are deleting from the table the next 2 rows. Is that correct?
That is correct. Those applications that are proposed to be adjourned sine die.
All right, and the lands to be retained, shown as parts 3, 4, 5, and 6 on said plan, will have a frontage of 37.86 meters on Frank Bender Street, a depth of 35.5 meters, and will contain a lot area of 1,343.8 square meters. And the parcel will contain the parcel will contain the existing detached dwelling, garage, and shed.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, look, we got 1 shed on the property, 2 sheds. How many sheds? Are we plural or not? Because we're inconsistent here so far.
I apologize, Madam Chair. I would just like to confirm. I believe it is 1 accessory structure. I believe there is a principal garage and then a secondary smaller shed, so it is plural.
All right, so just to our coordinator, Ms. Nguyen and Ms. Manette, and I know Ms. Williams, you're all there this evening, or I don't know if Ms. Williams is actually there this evening, but just so that we go back to the first paragraph, the existing detached dwelling, garage, and shed, not sheds, will be retained. So let's make that change if we could. The other thing I'm looking for here, and I think that completes our changes to the notices, Mr. Bolduc, would you agree?
Yes, there's just a couple of conditions that have been struck out, but if we're not ready to go there yet, then
We're not there yet. We're still doing the notice changes to the notice at this point.
understood.
So Ms. Brenner, Deputy Secretary Treasurer, do need a little bit of advice from you, because if I understand this, I think the committee actually has to pass a motion on this to adjourn sine die a portion of the application and then actually reference it. Is that correct? Sorry, you're on mute, Ms. Brenner.
That is correct, Madam Chair, and that will basically shelve those two applications in the event that there is further development proposed on that property.
All right. Which means though that we still need to get some public input on that adjournment. So please, somebody, if I forget, remind me in the course of our deliberations and decision-making to come back to that. All right. That said, okay. I think, Mr. Bunzik, the committee has reviewed all of the material. I don't think we need a presentation from you. And we note that all of the text within the planning report that related to the other two parts, the B00169 and the B00170, have been deleted because they no longer apply. So, okay. All right. Did you you have something you wanted to add, Mr. Bunzer, about the conditions? Let's talk about that now.
We had discussed with planning staff the removal of conditions 2 and 4 from the initial report. Those conditions were related to the demolition of the existing single detached structure, as well as the demolition of the accessory buildings. But in this case, as the intent is to adjourn those applications, those portions of the reciprocal consent, those buildings are no longer set demolished, and therefore those conditions are no longer required.
All right, so noted for our records, and we do have that before us, Mr. Budzik. Okay, I think that's the housekeeping side of things for now. So over to questions from the committee. Anyone? Okay.
No.
All right, at this, I think what we'd like to do then is go, have no registered speakers for this application. So I'm going to make a call out to the public. If anybody has an interest in the following, so either in support or opposition to the adjournment of portions of the applications that we talked about, or opposition or support for the severance that has been retained, that's remaining on the books, essentially. Anyone want to speak to this application, whether it's the adjournments or the actual consent? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. All right. Okay, committee, I think at this point then I'll call a motion on the adjournment sine die of B00169 and file B00170. All those in favor? All right, so for the record, those two file numbers and application, the portion of the application is adjourned sine die, and it's unanimous. So on the question of the remaining consent for B00168, all those in favor? Okay, all right. Again, for the record, it's unanimous. We are approving and granting this consent. So Mr. Budzik, it looks like you're already very familiar with the conditions. Any questions from you?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Then thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
All right, then. Good evening. You too. All right, we're going to go to number 4. I think it's 2332 Samuel Drive. I'm looking for the agent, Mr. Fiat. Mr. Fiat. I know it takes a little while to come out of being the audience into being in the active part.
Yes, it does. Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Pavel Fiat, architect, Atelier 292, representing owners of the said property.
All right, thank you. So we're not going to request a presentation from you this evening. I'm not seeing any housekeeping changes required for your application. So, and before we go any further, pardon me, we do need to get, there's no statutory declaration. Nope, so I'm going to have to read this to you. So do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that the sign was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
Yes, I do swear.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, going back to the application. Going to open it up to the panel members for questions, for clarification at this point. It's pretty straightforward. We're looking at an addition over an existing attached garage for a secondary unit. So just to confirm, Mr. Fiat, there's no change to the building footprint in any way?
There will be a column added at the very front of the building for support, but it does not affect in any way the area for which we're seeking variance for.
All right, Mr. Fiat, that column was clear on your site plan?
I believe so. Yeah, it's a minor item, but again, it just so that we have a full understanding. The building as it is constructed, there are two portions of it. There is a portion over my clients intend to put a second story addition over the entire building, and we're planning to add, and only a portion is being affected by the minor variance. So this is the section facing east on this plan. There was actually, as you are probably aware, there was a minor variance granted for the front yard setback reduction for the construction of the said garage in 2001. So essentially, because we're proposing to build a portion of the second story addition also over the garage, we're also seeking one minor variance for reduced front yard setback over that portion.
All right, but the relief required is not any greater. Is that correct?
No, it's just the proposed addition will sit directly over the existing garage. The existing garage will remain in place, and we're just putting the addition on top of it.
All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Fiat. So if we have no other questions or discussion, Ms. Wallace.
I'm just remembering the staff comment here about the elevations drawings not illustrating the existing average grade, and that making a note that additional relief or revisions may be required. And I'm just wondering from staff whether or not they have reason to believe that based on how the grade looks, it might exceed the building height requirement. Is that the concern?
Through you, Madam Chair, it was just out of an abundance of caution. We noticed that it wasn't established, and that is a requirement under the bylaw to establish existing average grade on the elevation drawings. So we indicated that just to provide out of caution.
So do we condition it accordingly, or do we amend if we're tying it to the plan? Do we tie it to the plan insofar as the relief? I don't know. I'm just a bit confused as to how we deal with this.
If I can just ask a follow-on question then. So what is going to be the finished elevation of the addition, and what is the actual zoning requirement? So if they're close, then it's an issue. If they're 3 feet off, then probably not.
Yeah, the latter is the case. The maximum building height, this is the zoning is R10, and the maximum building height is 8 meters. Just quickly looking at the elevations which were supplied, and I think they're in the package, we're well below that height. The site does undulate, but it's mostly not at the point where the building is. It's the site slopes towards the street, but the grade is very uniform. There's maybe a foot difference between one corner and the other. So overall, we're well below the 8 meters height. We're proposing a sloped roof, hip roof on the building. And as you're aware, the height of the building is measured to midpoint of such a roof. So we will be I would say easily 3 to 4 feet below the required 8 meters.
Thank you.
What that elevation will be based on that definition under the zoning bylaw? Do you have a number?
Well, I'm trying to read through a very small drawing I have here, but the height we have from the grade to the ground floor is somewhere around 0.4 meters. Then floor to floor height is around 3 meters on the ground floor, and 2.7 meters to the eaves of the roof, and the roof itself is 1.6 meters. So it would be somewhere in the range, doing a very quick math, 3.4, 6.4, 7.1. Yeah, it's sorry, 3.4, 5.4. I would have to verify. I'm sorry, I cannot read one of the numbers on the drawings, but we're below 8, definitely to the midpoint of the roof. I would have to open up the drawing and verify it. When we look at the height.
The reason why I'm asking, Mr. Fiat, is because if it's way off, if there's a significant difference, then probably we don't need to do anything about ensuring that we're covering all our angles. If it's close, however, then Ms. Willis is right. We need to be.
Yes, I understand, but it's we looked at that, and obviously, and I now in hindsight, I wish we had actually shown the 8 meters height on this. Let me just quickly, as we look at that, just run the numbers. So, as I stated, just a minute.
Madam Chair, just if it turns out that there is a non-compliance issue in the unlikely event based on what the applicant is saying, you just have to come back to us for a variance, right? I mean, it's a pain, but.
Yes. I know,
I would prefer not to do it.
It's just that we like to have these answers.
Yeah, so estimated value with the, there is at the back on the north side, there's a slightly higher projection of the basement, which is 0.42. Then, as I said, ground to second floor height is 2.81 meters. And then second to the underside of the ceiling, which also corresponds to the eaves, is 2.77. And then we have to the total roof height is 1.8, so we take half of it. So all combined, it adds up to 6.87 meters. Sorry, I took me a while I had to call it up on the screen to see the numbers.
That's all right. That's all right. That's what we're here for. And we can work through these things, and we appreciate your making the effort, actually.
It's about 4 feet below the prescribed maximum building height. All
right. So in that case, if you're okay, Ms. Willis, with this, maybe we'll just let it stand the way it is.
I'm fine with that.
All right. Okay. Perfect. Anything else, committee members? Because we do have some speakers. I can go to the speakers at this point. Looking for Richard and Nancy Budzik.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and committee members. We do not support the minor variance application. As the owners of 2328 Samuel Drive, our house is located right beside 2332 Samuel Drive. We're north of them. If anyone will be impacted by this addition, it is certainly us. We will lose all sunlight in our kitchen if this construction goes through. The impact of this will definitely damage our quality of life in the house. As well, our garden is situated on that very side of the house. Therefore, we'll lose all enjoyment of the gardening. As well, we also have concerns with the privacy of our house and backyard. They will add windows that will easily see into our house and into our backyard, which will intrude and erode our privacy. Also, they are adding a door at the back of their house, which is for the tenant to enter his apartment. However, it will be close to our side, which will mean more people on that side of the house. And again, for us, it's a privacy issue. But as well, we do have mature trees on that very side of the house, and we do not want them to be damaged, especially during the construction of this addition. Lastly, the houses built on Samuel Drive are pretty much all small bungalows. Now, this construction is allowed, it will fundamentally change the character of the street. If people start to build these addition, it will mean more people and more cars. Like I understand that some people will build a second addition for their own home, but now we're talking here about apartments. So now this changes the dynamic of our street. This brings me to ask, will they have enough parking for their tenants if they are to extend their house on their existing parking lot? Since they're asking for a reduced front yard setback of 1.74 meters, or will the tenant need to park on the road? Already our small street is inundated with cars. Will the tenants have access to the owner's backyard, or will it be again on our side? We have many concerns and there is no transparency for us. Thank you very much for letting us say our concerns.
All right, thank you, Madame Bodzuk. So I think there's a number of things that you've raised that I would like to just make sure that we address. So the one that really stuck with me is the damaged trees from construction. So Ms. Young, can you, I'm suspecting that because we're not adding footprint that there wouldn't be, but can you just confirm that putting a second floor, what the impact of a second floor of construction might be on surrounding trees?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. We don't have a tree information report for this site. It would only be required at the building permit stage, just because really the variance they're seeking doesn't directly impact the trees. There is a chance that they would need to prune those trees on their side of the property line, which is allowed. But really they need an arborist to assess that. And to my knowledge, that hasn't been done yet.
All right, but it will happen presumably at the building permit stage.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that's right.
All right. And on that, I'm looking to Ms. Cully on the secondary unit. I take it that's, I'm going to guess here, but it's a permitted use in this zone?
Yes, it is. Through you, Madam Chair, it is a permitted use in the zone, and to speak to the parking, no parking is required for a secondary dwelling.
Thank you. You read my mind. That was my next question. So in other words, these are all things that are permitted within the zone in your residential neighborhood. So even though there may not be any secondary units anywhere else, there is the permission to do that. And this is, I think the only reason we're seeing this one come forward is because they're looking specifically at expanding the dwelling in order to do that. But I would imagine that that if they were in fact not doing any development, that you could introduce a secondary unit and the committee wouldn't see that at all. So I think we've responded to, I know that probably doesn't give you any comfort, but at least I wanted to make sure that you got some answers on these things. Was there anything else?
Oh, that's all. Thanks.
All right. Any questions from the committee members for Ms. Chabot? No? All right. Okay. I'm going to make a call out then for anyone else in the audience who might want to speak either for or against this application. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. That being the case then, committee members, I think we're ready for a vote. Gonna make a call. All those in favor? All right. Okay, for the record then, the minor variance is granted unanimously. And we're going to wish you all the best then, Mr. Fiat, with the remainder of this, this project.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to go to the next one is item 8 for 2215 and 2217 Plesser Avenue. Looking for Mr. Robinson. Good evening, Mr. Robinson.
Good evening.
Before we get going, let me read this to you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that the sign was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I do swear that to be true.
All right, thank you. Okay, Very small, minor change to the notice. My understanding is that it's not Plesser Avenue, it's Plesser Street. So for the record, we are making that change. And I think that's all I have on my end. Mr. Robinson, in terms of changes to the notice, anything from you?
Nope. All
right, thank you. We're not looking for a presentation from you on this consent application. I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee at this point. No questions? All right. Okay, in terms of speakers on this item, I have the owner here. It's not the Ms. Tanya Berthium.
Yes, I gave her the contact details. I don't see her on the screen, but she was just here if there were any questions.
All right. We don't seem to have any questions at this point. So, all right. In which case, I'm going to open it up to the public in general. Anyone want to speak either for or against this application? Come forward, just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. All right, in that case, committee members, I think we're ready for a decision. All those in favor of this consent? Okay, again, for the record, the consent application is unanimously approved. Mr. Robinson, you've looked at all of the requirements for conditions.
Yes, there's a condition about a tree planting plan. We have had a couple of discussions with Ms. Young and Ms. Ramirez. I gather that there was, when the owners went to get the building permit, there was, I think at the time, initially, people used to have to give a tree deposit. Now that's no longer the case. Ms. Young has confirmed that. And in the coming days, we will have the designer update the site plan drawing to show a new street tree in front of each lot.
All right, so Ms. Brenner, looking for some advice from you. Do we need then to get Mr. Robinson to provide that revised plan to us within the next couple of days? Ms. Brenner?
I believe it can just be a condition of the decision of the committee, as noted in the report from staff on this one, Madam Chair.
Okay, if that's good enough, then that's fine with me. I just wanted to make sure that if we had the opportunity for revised plans to show some of this, that we would have it, but that's fine. It's covered off. You're quite right, one way or the other. So, okay. All right, lost my place. I think we've done members of the public. I think we've done the conditions up and we have done the vote. Yes, we have. I look at Mr. Sindel and I'm thinking, yeah, I think we've done this. Okay, thanks. So thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. I think that concludes this application for the evening.
Thank you and have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to move on then to application 6 and 7 for Kingsdale Avenue. Back to looking for Ms. Daoud. So we're going to ask you for a brief presentation on this, if you could, please. Oh,
Sure.
And wait. Okay, gonna have to read this to you as well. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that it was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I affirm that to be true.
Perfect. Okay, with that, not seeing any changes to the application that's required of the notice. So the floor is yours. Ms. Boone, with your presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. All right. So the site is located at 1764 Kingsdale Avenue, which is a large interior lot on the south side of Kingsdale, bounded by Queensdale Avenue to the south, 6th Street to the east, Bank Street to the southwest. The immediate neighborhood is characterized primarily by low-rise residential single detached dwellings on a range of lot sizes, and it's in close proximity to commercial and non-industrial uses located along Bank Street. The site presently contains a 1-story single detached dwelling on the east side of the property, a driveway roughly in the center of the lot, and a vacant space as well as trees to the west portion. And all of the trees are to remain as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. The proposed application is for reciprocal consents. The first being to sever parcel A, which is comprised of parts 1 and 2 shown on the draft R plan, from parcel B, and the intent is to create a vacant lot intended for future residential development. A minor variance application is also required for the newly created vacant lot for a reduction in lot area from the required 450 meters squared to proposed 403.2 meters squared. The lot does exceed the minimum lot width requirements under the zoning. And the next slide shows that a secondary or reciprocal consent is required to sever parcel B, which contains the existing dwelling at 1764 Kingsdale, and that's comprised of parts 3 and 4, and then we're severing that from parcel A. So these lot sizes, can just go back actually, thank you. These lot sizes were specifically designed to ensure that the existing dwelling and the new lot, the existing dwelling at 1764 as a new lot would comply fully with the zoning bylaw. If severed roughly down the middle of the property, there would have been sufficient land area for each lot to meet zoning requirements for lot area and lot width. But because of the orientation of the existing house, which is to remain, this would have resulted in the requirement to introduce a front yard parking space at the existing house. And so through discussions with the owner and the city, the preferred approach was to shift the property line slightly to the west to allow sufficient space for a compliant parking space and landscape buffer at 1764 Kingsdale, which ultimately resulted in the need for a required lot area variance for the newly created parcel A. So as we were briefly discussing earlier in the hearing tonight, on the 1764 parcel, between the building at the closest point to the street and the proposed lot line, there's a 2.97 meter width of space at a length of the entirety of the front yard setback, which is 7.59 meters, which allows for sufficient space for the required 0.15 meter landscape buffer and a minimum 2.6 meter parking space width. So that was the intent to shifting the property line over to accommodate for that amount of space for the parking spaces. And to the next slide. Thank you. So this just shows an aerial context from GeoOttawa mapping. So though undersized by zoning standards in terms of lot area, the proposed new lot is compatible with the character of the existing neighborhood. So as you'll see, in black is the subject site, which is quite a bit larger than quite a few of the lots in the immediate context. And then some approximate calculations were done just based off GeoOttawa mapping to show comparable lot sizes to the proposed newly created parcel. So there were counted to be 4 lots that were less than 400 meters squared within the immediate area, and 3 of those are along Kingsdale Avenue. And then there were approximately 11 lots that were calculated to be also under the zoning requirement of 450 meters squared. So the proposed lot and severance is compatible with this context and will allow for modest infill development in an urban area that does have adequate road access, municipal serving, is close proximity to Bank Street, and so forth. And this format of development has been reflected in other examples in the area where double wide lots have been severed with a new dwelling constructed on the newly created parcel and retaining the existing dwelling on the remnant parcel. The vacant parcel will, as exemplified in the context, it will be sufficiently large for the owner to construct a single detached dwelling that will be designed to fully comply with zoning bylaw provisions in the future. The requested variance meets the 4 tests under Section 45 of the Planning Act, and it meets the intent and purpose of the zoning and OP by creating 2 new lots, one of which it will be fully zoning compliant, and the other which is sufficiently large to accommodate a new single detached dwelling. Again, it's a modest and permitted format of residential intensification that is supported by the compatibility criteria of the official plan and represents good land use planning. And if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I will say that I did provide the small little sketch that I had provided to city staff to show the approximate location of the driveway. It's not in this, there we go, thank you. So this is what I had provided. It's just to show, so this survey outlines the existing asphalt, but I will note that it's actually not perfectly accurate in that the asphalt is actually currently in line with the existing dotted hatched line shown in red. So the existing asphalt does go all the way up to the existing building and all the way down the full length of the front yard to the street. And the proposed parking space would be in that location. The landscape buffer, there is sufficient room for that. However, it's not there at this time. So through discussions with city planning staff, it was confirmed that the best way to handle that would be to not tie the approvals to the plans filed with the committee, to allow the owner the opportunity to add the landscape buffer in when he proceeds with construction on the site. And with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to throw one out there first, I think, because I guess, you know, if I understood this correctly, the existing property has over 30 meters. So the applicant could have come in and said, I want 3 lots, and then just asked for greater lot area reductions without any issues on the width. Is that correct?
Correct, in lot width, yes. Yeah, the lot width requirements are quite small actually for this area. It's only 9 meters, so.
Yeah, I was noticing that, and when I did the math, I thought, well, 9 meters means that they could have easily created 3 lots with a minor variance request for reductions in the lot areas for each one of those.
Correct,
So,
yeah.
but they didn't, which, you know, I think we see it a lot where there's sort of this maximizing of the density. And in this case, you know, I applaud the applicant in the sense that that they're meeting more or less the character of the area. So it's nice to see that on occasion. Okay, any questions from Ms. Wallace, Mr. Hindall? All right, do I have anyone on for? No, I do not have anybody on my speakers list. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak either for or against this application? All right, well, looks like we're ready for a vote on the consent application. Committee members, all those in favor? All right, for the record, the consent application is unanimously approved. And on the minor variance, all those in favor? All right, then again, the minor variance application is unanimously granted. So, and Ms. Aoud, you've looked at all the conditions, you're aware of and the additional notes and everything that staff has provided.
Yes, I have, Madam Chair. I've reviewed the conditions. I do actually have a few questions and clarifications, and I apologize that I didn't raise these with city staff earlier, but I wanted to address the parking space questions. So it kind of got lost in that, and perhaps I could review just a couple points for that if possible. Please. Okay, so just a few small things. The first being with condition 3, we definitely agree to the provision of a grading plan. That's no problem at all. My question would be, would it be appropriate to remove the requirement for a grading plan for the proposed vacant lot and simply show existing for the entire site, and then transfer that requirement for the proposed grading to the building permit stage, where that could be more accurate representation of the proposed grading with the actual building design?
Right, Ms. Cully. Your thoughts, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, I haven't had an opportunity to discuss that with the engineer that provided the conditions, so I'm not comfortable speaking to the conditions themselves without speaking to the engineer who provided them.
All right. Next, Ms. Dial.
Next, yes, would be condition 4, which is the requirement for a noise study. And again, I apologize that I hadn't asked you before, but I'm just wondering if city staff could clarify the rationale for the requirement for the noise study.
The noise study, I can, through you, Madam Chair, the airport vicinity development zone, it is within that area, and that was why the requirement was imposed on the consent.
Okay, so just speaking to that, then I'm wondering if it would be possible, through you, Madam Chair, to have that condition removed on the basis that this is an urban area. It's actually fairly much more so on the edge of the airport vicinity zone, and there is a requirement to add a noise clause agreement on title to the properties anyways. So it feels somewhat redundant to have to do a noise study, plus there's going to be a noise clause and the wording of the airport's noise clause as well on title.
Great. So Ms. Cullen, can you confirm that this property is in fact inside the AOIZ?
Yes, I can confirm that.
So that applies, even if it's on the edge, it applies.
Yes, yes.
So, but I agree with you. Did we, Ms. Cullen, get any comments from the airport authority directly? I didn't see anything.
Yes, we did.
You did. Okay. So what did the airport authority say?
Let me pull that up.
All right, go ahead.
Here, this one here. They spoke to, so it's quite long. Would you like me to read the entire thing, Madam Chair?
Just the part in terms of what kind of mitigation they're looking for.
They spoke to, they wanted to have registered on title that there's an aircraft noise warning clause. And they say, despite the inclusion of the noise control features within the dwelling unit, noise due to aircraft operations may continue to interfere with indoor and outdoor activities in the summer months. And they are not responsible for any noise control.
Have they asked specifically for a noise study though?
Not specifically that I can see here.
All right. In which case, members of the committee, if you're okay with this, I would like to amend that condition so that we retain the requirement for a noise warning clause on title, but not for, unless there's an arterial road noise control reason to keep the requirement for a noise study. If it was only triggered, if this condition was only triggered because of the airport, then we can rely on the warning clause on title. And if there's other reasons, then we'll retain the actual study. Ms. Cullen, looking to you.
I just wanted to make sure that was the question, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, the only one was the airport.
It was just the airport. Okay, in which case, I think I've got agreement from my fellow panel members. We're amending the agreement, or sorry, the condition in the manner that we just talked about, which is to say, enter into an agreement at the expense of the owner, which is to be registered on title to deal with covenants and notices that shall run with the land and bind future owners on subsequent transfers, warning purchasers and or tenants of expected noise levels due to existing sources of environmental noise. Yeah, so we're keeping number 5. Where was the noise study requirement?
Condition 4.
It's number 4, eh? So in other words, are we striking number 4 then? Yeah, so we can strike condition number 4.
Okay.
Any concerns, Ms. Cullen?
None from me, Madam Chair, thank you.
All right. Any members were good with that? So as part of our decision, our granting of the consent application, we are removing the condition number 4. We're good? Okay. Well, I think that's it. And I think the only other thing we needed to be sure of is that the approval is generally tied to the plans and not explicitly tied to the plan. So I don't remember the wording. I know there's like different time to the plans, but it's going to be general in this case. Does that work for everyone?
All right. For you, Madam Chair, I do have one more question. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just have a concern with one more condition, and I'm hoping potentially it could be resolved. But the wording, so there's a requirement in condition number 2 for a site servicing plan, which is fine. There is also a requirement in condition number 6 to provide evidence to the satisfaction of chief building official that both severed and retained parcels listing both addresses have their own independent water, sanitary, and storm, complying to the Ontario Building Code. And I referenced that building code regulation just to check to see what that was. And it does reference specifically to a building. So I have no concerns with the portion of that that's referencing 1764 because there is a building, so that makes sense. I'm just wondering if there's going to be any issues potentially with referencing the vacant parcel and requiring to comply with building code when there's not yet a building in that location. If that makes sense.
Addresses here.
Madam Chair, I think probably it does say that they have to enter into an agreement already, and that condition for the future development to be developed lot could be added into the agreement that has to be prepared anyway.
So you're saying number 6, tie number 6 to a development agreement?
Number 5 is requiring an agreement anyway. So we could put a condition about separate services. They wouldn't get a building permit if it wasn't anyway.
Correct.
It could just put into the development agreement.
Number 2, condition number 2 is standard. We always have that for consent applications. What's new here is condition number 6. And I know that there has been discussions with building code services as of late, and that some improvements to conditions have been added. And this is my understanding from discussions. And you know, it's interesting, we don't have anybody from building code services here to tell us why this particular condition 6 was added in addition to number 2. I think we're going to retain it, Ms. Daou, and I'll tell you why. Because they're in preparing the development agreement and in dealing with legal services, there's always a little bit of, there's still discussion to be had, and you can talk to legal services how best to deal with this so that it's actually, it doesn't become an impediment. If it's here, it's because I believe it's been added. There's been some purpose to it, but I don't think it's insurmountable at the point when you're actually getting the development agreement in place.
Okay, yep, that works. I just wanted to confirm just because I haven't seen that condition before. I've seen condition 2, of course, many times, but yeah, I just wanted to confirm it wouldn't be an issue when it comes to the stage of having the building permit for the new parcel. So thank you for that clarification.
Just so you know, we've been having a number of issues with building code things in the past, and building code services has been kind enough to now sort of prepare the conditions that they feel are the ones that we should be imposing. It is relatively new. It's even new to us. So trying to understand exactly the nuanced difference between the two, that's for us to better understand, but I don't believe it's going to become an impediment.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too, thanks.
Okay, we're going to go on to actually number 13, which is 1967 Banff Avenue. I think I'm looking, who am I looking for here? Looking for Mr. Bourgeon, the agent. Ms. Manette, Ms. Nguyen. Oh, yes, I see Mr. Bourgeon is there. Okay, great. Good evening. All right, before we get going, I do believe I need to read something to you and get your response. So do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies, secondly, for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, And lastly, that the sign was clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time. Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I affirm that to be true.
Perfect. Okay. So with that, I believe we don't need a presentation from you at this point, but we do have to make a couple of notice changes, I think, on this. So my understanding is we had amendment A or variance A, and we have variance B. And what we're doing is we're actually adding, for an abundance of caution, a new variance, which is a technical variance in this case, due to a discrepancy in the bylaw. And so, Ms. Ramirez, if I'm getting this wrong, you can correct me as I go. But I think we're adding C, which looks almost the same, said a different way, to A because of this discrepancy in the bylaw, correct?
Correct, Madam Chair.
Perfect. So I'm going to read this into the record. So we're adding new variance C to permit a reduced rear yard setback of 3.6 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 7.5 meters. Are we good, Mr. Bourgeon?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I don't believe I had any other housekeeping amendments on this. Yes, I did. On A, we are at the very last couple of words. We're striking 6.66 and amending that to 6.65 meters. Is that correct? Okay. All right. I don't believe there's anything else from a housekeeping standpoint. So that said, I am going to just a minute. Ms. Ramirez, did I miss anything?
The online notice that I had listed 9.4. The rear yard setback is 9.4% of the lot depth, and that was 2.5 meters. So I've made the corrections. Perhaps you were looking at a different notice. If you
know what, I'm going to read what I'm now seeing on a different page. And just to make sure that we have it right, and Ms. Ramirez, you can correct me. So for A, to permit a reduced rear yard setback of, we're striking 9.4, going with 13.5. And that's the way we had it, of the lot depth, or 2.5 we're striking for 3.6 meters. The rest of it remains with, yes, with the change that we talked about to 6.65. In B, it's to permit a reduced rear yard area of not 9, we're striking 9, but 14.8% of the lot area, or not 38, but rather 60 square meters, we're correct? Okay, the remainder remains, and then C is as we've already entered into the record, correct? Okay, good. I just want to make sure I'm not, two aren't aligning for me, so I'm glad we did that. Okay, members of the committee, questions for Mr. Bourgeon? No questions? Mr. Hindle? No? All right. Okay. In terms of speakers on this one, we had from March 3rd, Mr. Norman Payne. Do we have Mr. Payne? Either on the phone?
No, Madam Chair, Mr. Payne does not appear online tonight.
All right, thank you very much. That said, then I'm just going to open it up generally to the public. Anyone who has an interest in the application, either for or against, there's a chance, just raise your hand and we'll bring you in. All right, not seeing anyone. In that case, members of the committee, all those in favor? All right, for the record, the application for minor variances is unanimously granted. And I believe that concludes our items with you, Mr. Bourgeon. Any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next application that we'd like to deal with is 322 Perrier Avenue. And I think I'm looking for Mr. Hume. Could be around, but just, yes, Mr. Hume.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I have going to change my video here for a second.
Fine. Take the time you need, Mr.
There you go. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, and I think I do need to read to you as well this evening. Just a second. Make sure I got it right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that it was clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I swear it to be true.
Perfect. Thank you. Now I'm noting that doesn't seem to be any requirement for housekeeping changes to your application. Can you confirm that just to be sure that I'm not missing?
There shouldn't be. We've been to this is the second time we've been to the committee. So I think we've got it all together now with the help of Ms. Ramirez and your staff, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. So Mr. Hume, I think we're going to ask you for a brief presentation, if that's okay.
Sure. So this is an application for consent to create 2 parcels of land for a semi-detached dwelling and a minor variance to allow for a small increase in height on the 3rd floor from 8.5 meters to 9.5 meters. As you can see from the key plan in front of you, there is this Perrier Avenue is an interesting little street. To the left, the large building is the Centre d'Accueil Champlain, and the blank space is on the eastern side of Perrier Avenue is the parking lot is the parking lot for the center, and in behind it is the green space of the former Vanier City Hall. So this is a fairly standard semi-detached dwelling that's going in on a vacant parcel of land on Perrier Avenue. If you could go to the next slide. And just to give you a little bit of context around the site, you can see the Centre d'Accueil Champlain to the north, the parking lot, right across the house across the street. And so what we did, and you're seeing them and they look like they're higher, and that's because in fact they are higher. The grade changes quite significantly in 2 ways. As you move up Perrier Avenue towards the south, the grade starts to rise about 312, and then about 312 Perrier, and then it rises to the back. So it's rising in sort of 2 directions, southerly and easterly, which has created some unique challenges. And as you can see from the 3-story building that we have on the right-hand side, you can see that they've taken advantage of that grade change to accommodate their development. Another thing in this area, the applicant isn't going to be building a basement. There are some concerns around soil in this area. So what he's chosen to do is to excavate, and the slab at about 5 feet is going to be on piles to accommodate the development. So in terms of planning, there are really one good indicator that the city asks for when it starts to look at whether height is appropriate. But in that context, we went actually a step further at the advice of Ms. Willis, and we went and we got the 1K mapping from the city, so that we could kind of give an idea of what we would see across the street, knowing that would give us, would give us a frame of reference. So if you could go to the next slide. So as you can see, the first thing that the city likes to know is where they want you to be under or at the 45-degree angular plane from the rear yard for your building. Anything above that, they believe, isn't really appropriate from a height perspective, but we are almost, as you can see, we've plotted that out, and we are incredibly close to that 45-degree angle. So much so that city staff have accepted that this meets that guideline in their guidelines for infill, minor residential infill development. And what we did, so the other thing that we should show you is what we did is we plotted out the house across the street, which we showed you in one of the photos. And as you can see, it sits at about, the top or the peak of the roof is about 8.5 meters now-ish. And we've shown the difference. It would probably be a 1.5 meter difference in height if you were to look across the street. And as I said, that the grade changes, it rises upwards. So that 1.5 starts to get smaller as you move southerly. And the last thing that I'll show you, if you can go to the next slide, is one of the things that the city asked us to do is to bring the corners of the building back. Originally, we had them set back about a meter, but they asked us if we could increase that setback. So those areas that we've identified are now set back 2.54 meters from the front setback line. So it really brings both corners of those buildings back to lessen the impact of the increase of the 1 meter height increase. So given that this application should be judged by the 4 tests, isn't in keeping with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. It is, and the general intent of the official plan. The official plan permits this type of development. The zoning bylaw permits semi-detached dwellings in this area. So we believe that the general intent of both the zoning bylaw and the official plan are met. Is it minor in nature? I think by the tests that have been provided show that the increase is quite minor in terms of both abutting grades and the tests in the city's in applicability to the city's guidelines. So we believe it's minor in nature, and it is desirable because it is new construction on an empty lot in the local area. So, Madam Chairman, that would be my submission to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hume. I do have one quick question for you with regards to the consent. Can you give us your professional opinion as to whether or not the consent complies with the requirements of the provincial policy statement?
Oh, in what respect, Madam Chair?
I'm just looking to see, I just need you to confirm that the consent application as presented does in fact comply with the requirements of provincial policy standards in general.
I believe it does, Madam Chair. It has been conducted by a registered surveyor and reviewed by the applicant's legal counsel. So we believe it does comply. I mean, we would be surprised if it didn't. So.
Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you. That's all I needed. Anyone else from the committee have questions for Mr. Hugh on either the consent or the minor variance? All right, Ms. Ramirez, anything you would like to, I mean, you've had a chance to look at some of the evidence that Mr. Hume has provided with regards to the height. No issues from your standpoint?
No, Madam Chair. Staff is have no concern with the increase to height, provided that the decision is going to be tied to the mass and the height of the that is shown on the plans.
All right, so tied strictly to those plans. All right, very good. We can do that. Not a problem. Okay, in which case, do I have somebody to speak to this application? I do have a registered speaker, Mr. Marc Lortzy. Mr. Lortzy with us this evening? Mr. Lortzy?
Yes.
Do you want to put your video on?
I am getting to that. Thank you.
Right. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, so I understand that you're at 310 Perrier.
That is correct.
All right. Please go ahead and make your submission.
I am actually speaking against this proposal. Even at the allowable height of 8.5 meters, the proposed project on Perrier would not fit into the context of the existing housing stock, which consists mostly of mid-century bungalows, split levels, high ranches, and duplexes. Generally in the 1 to 2 story range, the majority of the existing housing stock on Perrier sports pitched roofs with generous overhangs, natural stone, brick, and wood siding on the street-facing facade. So at 8.5 meters, this proposed structure would tower over its direct neighbors, will likely cast shadows onto these adjacent and abutting properties. Additionally, it will denature the street composition with its stubby facade, which, by the way, has been revised, large window expanses, parapets, and flat roofs. So in reference to the presentation, the previous presentation, it's true that there's newer housing on Dufort Street, on Boudreau Street, on Laverne Street with short driveways and 3-story sites. But even the project that came out of École Cadieux in 2009 is not the same zoning. It's R4. And the South Champlain is I1A, I believe. So even though there might be multiplexes and 3-story buildings around, there's no such existing housing stock on Perrier. And additionally, these, because of the grading, cannot be seen concurrently when observing the streetscape on Perrier. In my opinion, granting an exemption to the height limit for a set of modern townhomes completely deviates from the character of the street. That's my presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lortzy. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Lortzy? All right. Mr. Lortzy, I see that you're about 4 houses down from the subject property.
That is correct.
And your house, can you characterize your house for me? How it looks?
Split level, 1.5 stories in the height.
All right. Anyone else on for questions, Mr. Loxley? I'll make a call out to anyone else in the audience who may have an interest in this application, either for or against. Now's your chance. You can come forward. All right, I'm not seeing anybody come forward. I do have one question for you, Mr. Loxley. Were you consulted on this proposal?
In what sense was I consulted?
Did the applicant come to see you to talk about the proposal, and was there any
No.
consultation with you at all?
I've had
All right.
no consultation with the applicant.
All right, thank you, Mr. Loxley. Mr. Hume. Oh, Mr. Hume, we can't. Mr. Hume, we cannot hear you.
You hear me better now, Madam Chairman? Yeah. Madam Chairman, I delivered, I may have lost. I delivered flyers up and down the street myself for the March hearing, which we gave our contact information and we shared everyone. We shared the plans with the people up and down the street. So he may not have got it for this application, but certainly we circulated them for the March hearing. Absolutely. I did it myself.
All right, and did you also have contact with the community association?
No, we did not have contact with the community association.
All right, thank you. Okay.
I did listen into the March hearing, although I was too late to register to speak, but I know that it had been postponed.
Okay. All right. You know, even if you don't register, you can always speak to the committee. It's open. As long as you have an interest, even if you haven't registered, don't worry about that. Just let us know if you're at the hearing. When we're back in person, it's easier than electronically for sure, but please never worry about that. Okay, I think we're kind of ready to go to a decision at this point. So committee on the consent, all those in favor? All right. For the record, the consent is unanimously approved. And on the minor variance, all those in favor? All right. I am dissenting on it, on the minor variance. I don't believe the height is in fact that minor. I don't believe it meets that test under the Planning Act. So I am dissenting on that application. But as you know, majority rules, so the application is granted nonetheless. Mr. Hume, you've read the conditions?
I have, Madam Chair.
All right. And any questions or discussion required?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Then I think that concludes our business with you this evening, Mr. Hume. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Sorry
Madam
to getting
Chair,
a little late.
members of the committee.
Okay. Have a great summer.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to the next one is 10 Gifford Court applications 9 and 10. I am looking for Mr. Budzik.
Hello again, Madam Chair.
Hello again. I am going to have to read to you again, so just hang on. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and that the sign was clearly visible and legible for the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I do affirm that to be true.
Perfect. We are looking for, as you know, there's a lot of interest in this application this evening. We have a number of people who are registered to speak. So we're going to ask you for a full presentation. And in that presentation, I'd like you to be sure to go over the consultation with the neighborhood. But before we go there, we have some notice changes to make. And I believe, so bear with me here, but I think on the consent application, under the purpose, we're going to change it to the owner wants to subdivide their property into 2 separate parcels of land for the construction of a semi-detached dwelling, period. No development is proposed at this time. However, the owner's intent is to demolish the existing detached dwelling and construct a semi-detached dwelling, correct?
That is correct, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
In the area, we are changing the area noted from 270.17 to 270.08 for B00163. And for B00164, we're changing the area from 292.63 to 292.94 square meters. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right. We're also,
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt you. We seem to have to lose Mr. Hindle.
we've lost whom?
Mr. Hindle. Scott Hindle.
Is that somebody who was registered to speak?
Sorry, Madam Chair, just for clarification, Member Hindle. We seem to have lost him.
Oh, we've met. Sorry, I see. I did not hear that. Okay. Then, Mr. Bodzik, we're just going to pause and give Mr. Hindle a chance to come back.
Understood. Thank you.
If we can't get Mr. Hindle back, this is to and the last application, which is for Walkley Road. If we can't get Mr. Hindle back, then we're going to have to step this down because we'll have lost quorum. For Mr. Price, just so that you're aware. I think this is a first. Oh, here comes Mr. Hindle. You're back, Mr. Hindle. We waited for you.
My computer decided to crash at the inopportune time, but we're good. We're back.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear that. Okay, so we're just going to continue on then, Mr. Bolduc, with the changes to the notice. So I'd just like to also make a similar change to the minor variance application in the purpose statement. So if the owner has filed applications for consent, D08-01-21/B. Okay, I'm not going to read all the file numbers, which, if approved, will have the effect of creating 2 separate parcels of land for the construction of a semi-detached dwelling, period. And then the sentence remains the same. And I think we are also, I have a note here, and Ms. Cully, you might have to help me out here, but renumbering the second variance, B. We have to make a change? Oh, I see. Yes. Okay, I understand. I see it now, Ms. Cully. It was a typo, but for the record, we're going to change that A to AB. Okay, looks good. Okay, Mr. Budzik.
All right.
Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. I do have a presentation if the coordinator could please pull that up. We can skip to the next slide. The property is located in Ward 23, Canada South, just west of Eagleson Road. The blue indicates the subject property, number 10 Guilford Court, which is accessed just off of Courtney through Old Colony Road. Next slide, please. We'll see that the consent applications at hand are to sever the property into 2 separate parcels for the future construction of semi-detached dwellings, one on each half, essentially, of the block of the parcel. So there would be one half of the building, a semi-detached dwelling located on part 1 and a second dwelling located on part 4. Those are the consent applications. Next slide, please. With respect to the minor variance applications, we are seeking permission to permit a reduced lot width for each of the two properties. The western lot is proposed to have a lot width of 8.82 meters, whereas the eastern lot is proposed to have a lot width of 8.95 meters, whereas the minimum required in the R2C zone is 9 meters. With all other respects, the proposed lots meet the minimum lot area under the zoning bylaw and all other provisions. Next slide, please. Once again, going to the zoning compliance table, we can see that the minimum lot area under the R2C zone is 270 square meters. Both lots are at least a minimum of 270 square meters. And once again, the minimum lot widths that are being reduced are to 8.82 meters and 8.95 meters, which are reductions of 18 centimeters and 5 centimeters respectively. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. If we can go back one more slide, back again. Thank you. Just to touch on this a little bit, the lot width reduction is required due to the tapered shape of the property. It is wider at the front, at the north side, than it is at the back. Being on a court and also having a court to the rear, some of the lot shapes are rather irregular, leading to this wedge type shape. So the frontage of the property actually exceeds the 9 meters, but of course, the lot width is measured at a right angle to the front yard setback, being 4.5 meters, and therefore the tapered shape of the property leads to a requirement for a variance in order to develop these lots with semi-detached dwellings under the R2C zone. 2 more slides, please. So under the Planning Act, we do not believe that a plan of subdivision is required. The effect of the development is such that it meets the provincial with respect to intensification within existing communities under the official plan. It also meets the intent of the general urban area, and I'll get to that under the 4 tests. The land is suitable for this. It is already zoned R2. The dimensions and shapes of the lots are relatively regular, given the existing lot orientation and fabric of the community. And there are also no restrictions or proposed restrictions on the land with respect to the proposed development. I'll proceed now to the 4 tests for the minor variances. Next slide, please. The proposal meets the general intent and purpose of the official plan. So the lot is located within the general urban area, which is the yellow area as shown on Schedule B right here. And within the general urban area, Policy 5 specifies that existing communities will be, that the official plan does seek to intensify within existing communities with ground-oriented dwellings, and does specify that predominant form of intensification will be through semi-detached dwellings. And because this proposal is to reduce those lot widths and permit semi-detached dwellings, I believe that this meets the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Next slide, please. The next test is about meeting the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. So once again, this site is located within the R2C zone. The R2 zone does generally permit single detached dwellings and semi-detached dwellings as permitted dwelling types. In this case, we do meet the minimum lot area of 270 square meters, and the proposed reductions to the lot widths, once again, are 18 centimeters and 5 centimeters from a required lot width of 9 meters. And this is generally in keeping within the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and the planned function of the community with respect to the zoning. Next slide, please. The next test is if it is desirable for the development and use of the land. In this case, we would be proposing the removal of an existing single detached dwelling, and for the purposes of intensification, replacing it with a semi-detached dwelling on each of the 2 parcels. It is desirable and for the development and use of the land as it is in keeping with the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and the plan function for the community. Next slide. And finally, we believe that it meets the 4th test, that it is minor in nature. The lot width reductions, again, are required due to the tapered nature of the lot, which is part of the irregular lot shapes found predominantly in this community. Again, with the courts, you tend to have these wedge-shaped parcels all around the court itself. The variances represent a 2% reduction in the required lot width on the western parcel. So again, 18 centimeters. And on the eastern parcel, we're looking at a reduction of 0.55% with respect to the lot width. So these are very minor in nature and would be imperceptible to anyone walking down the street to see if this lot width did meet that 9 meters. So with respect to that, I do believe that the variances requested are minor in nature. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I believe that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Budzik. Questions from the committee on either the consent or the minor variance? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from either of our members this evening. That being the case, then I think we can move on to our speakers list. As I said, I have quite a list of folks here. I'm wondering whether or not, and I will read out the addresses, and then I'm going to look for somebody to come forward. So I've got somebody from 13 Gifford, 11 Gifford, 3 Gifford, 9 Gifford, and 2 people from 17 Gifford. Is there someone on the street that can be a spokesperson on behalf of the others? And then we'll call anybody else on this list to add to the issues. But is there anybody prepared to act as a spokesperson at this point? All right, if not, and typically we do encourage neighbors when they have concerns about an application to get together and appoint a spokesperson. And that way, if there's any additional issues, we just then go one by one, but at least we get the main ones on the record. So I'm going to just go by the list that I have in order, looking for Christine Walker. Christine Walker, do we have? Ms. Manette or Ms. Nguyen, can you please confirm whether Ms. Walker is?
Madam Chair, we don't have Ms. Walker online.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next person or folks on my list, looking for Michael Adam and Carol McMullen.
Again, not online.
All right, thanks, Ms. Manette. All right, I'm looking for Ms. Ashley McTurnan.
Hi, Madam Chair, I'm here.
Okay, so then, sorry, your last name then is Plant or McTurnan?
My computer is registered to Plant, but my married name is McTurnan.
Okay, so let's stick for the record with McTurnan, please. And you can confirm you're at 11 Gifford?
It's actually Guilford.
Or Guilford, sorry.
That's okay.
My bad,
No
bad,
problem.
thank you. All right, so there's a 5-minute rule, folks, just so you, one at a time. And I'm gonna ask that if somebody has already iterated what or articulated your concern, if you could not repeat it, that would be great. I take good notes. I go back and try to get questions answered, that kind of thing. So if you think everything's been covered, great. If not, then of course you're welcome to add. So Ms. McTurnan, yours is the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note a couple points before I get started. The application numbers on the notice that was served to neighbors differ from the application numbers that were served to the committee. You might just want to check into that. Secondly, the property is already demolished. I noted on the application that it says the intent was to demolish. That is not true. And third, there's no consultation prior to today's presentation by the applicant. Nor have we seen any plans for the structure. So with that, I will go ahead and start. So we do live at number 11 Guilford, which is directly across the street from the number 10 property, which used to house a bungalow, a 1-story bungalow. We live in a split level. It was originally built in 1969, as was all the other houses on the street, mainly bungalows and split levels. The sun rises directly behind number 10. It actually shines right into my window, and with COVID working from home, it is quite nice to work in. So with the intent of this new property, which I understand to be a semi-detached home standing at up to 11 meters tall, I will not get that sunlight. So you can imagine the impact that it may have on my mental health. Secondly, Glencairn was built in the 1960s. The lot sizes, including the setbacks, were determined to suit the design and the urban plan for the neighborhood. These minimum setback requirements and lot widths under the relevant zoning for the neighborhood were established for a reason. If you allow individuals to deviate from these rules, then why have them in the first place? The intent of zoning is to prescribe these setbacks. Any deviation from these setbacks would not be compatible with the surrounding houses and would cause such issues like loss of privacy. I'll give you an example. The minimum setback requirement for this neighborhood is 1.5 meters from the property line. That's 3 meters between a house. Most of the houses, the original designs for these houses, there are windows on the sides of the house. I can stand in my kitchen and look out my window, and I cannot see my neighbor through her window in her kitchen. But if you were to put a townhome that does not, that's closer to the 1.5 meter setback with no window or with a window, what are we going to do about privacy issues at that point? In fact, the house directly across this, or directly beside number 10 has a window into their child's bedroom. So let me ask you this. At what point is too close too close? And at what point is a variance unreasonable? Can I ask what your definition is of preserving the neighborhood, as that falls within the zoning requirements? I don't believe that applying for a variance or severing lots on a quiet court of 20 single-family homes is preserving the characteristics of our neighborhood. Building a house twice as tall as the houses on the street is not preserving the characteristics of our neighborhood. In order to fit the character of the neighborhood, the builder would have to use the appropriate materials and color, architectural style, and setbacks. Has the committee seen these plans for the house? Are these developments desirable from a planning or public interest lens? I'm sure the applicant thinks his plans are desirable because he is going to make a bunch of money and walk away. In fact, I want to note that item number 3 is the same developer and the same designer. Item number 3 on this agenda. He won't need to deal with the increased traffic, the pressures on the already overcrowded schools. We have lived on the street for 12 years and raised 2 boys. If we wanted to purchase a home in a newly developed area where the houses were 11 meters high and jammed together, we would have done that 12 years ago. But we chose Glen Cairn because the last thing we wanted was to have large homes close together. Our street is so close-knit that we often celebrate holidays together. But should you allow these applications made by a business and not a homeowner that has no intention of ever living on the street, you will destroy the beautiful community that the street has created. Sure, we can look at the city's official plan, but we can also take a look at every surrounding neighborhood that's being built in Canada and Stittsville right now. So I ask you this, can you not meet your intensification quota with these neighborhoods? Why do you have to come into an established neighborhood? Now you can argue that this is only one additional house, but it's not. It's the start of what will end up being 10 houses over the next year or 100 houses over the next 10 years. Once you allow such deviance from the set regulations, you open the floodgates for a variety of problems. Is the city prepared? Does Canada have its flooding under control? Have schools been built? So please take our arguments today and imagine this house as 100 additional houses in the small community of Glen Cairn. And I will leave it to my neighbors. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Ms. McTurnan. Any questions for our speaker from the panel? Okay, you've raised a lot of good points. Interesting on the consultation, it was one of the pieces. Mr. Bolduc, I'm going to ask you to, I think I'd actually even asked you to cover that as part of your presentation, but I don't recall what you said.
That's right, Madam Chair.
Can you describe the consultation, please?
Yes, I can. We actually prepared a notice in advance of submitting the applications. So the day before we dropped off the applications at the Committee of Adjustment, we had prepared a letter along with the draft R plan and submitted it to a list of properties within 60 meters of the property, exactly the same properties that would receive a notice from the committee. We wanted to be sure we were there first and that the community was consulted. I did place my contact information in that letter. I did not receive any emails or inquiries from any of the neighbors. I do have that list of addresses if you would like.
So, Mr. Bolduc, am I to understand that literally the day before you were submitting the applications, you undertook that handout exercise?
The owner had consulted with some of the neighbors on the property, but we wanted to be sure that they received notice first. So we submitted that letter to all those mailboxes so that they can consult with us in advance of the hearing. Yes.
Yeah. So, Mr. Bolduc, that's not really the kind of consultation that the committee looks for, especially in something like this where I would have to agree with Ms. McTurnan that, in fact, if I'm looking at the lot fabric of that street, this is in fact the beginning of a denser lot fabric. So I would agree with that. Okay. And this owner who undertook consultation prior to your handouts, can you describe that a little bit more for me too, please?
Yes, so in speaking with the owner, when they were on site with respect to the demolition of the existing house, which is my understanding they had obtained a demolition permit for the demolition of the existing single detached dwelling, they had neighbors come out and speak to them and ask them what they were doing. And the owner did provide the information that they are looking to construct a new residence on the property and that they will be proceeding with applications through the Committee of Adjustment in order to do so. I do believe that, I apologize, but Miss Plant, as it appears on my screen, was one of the neighbors that did speak to the owner. That is my understanding. I was not there. I cannot affirm that. But that there would have been discussions with the neighbors. And again, in that letter, I did offer to host a public Zoom meeting in order to discuss with the neighbors and see if there was anything we could do to work with them and help their concerns. I did not receive any emails from anyone, and those letters would have been deposited at the end of May.
But this was for discussions after you submitted the applications. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, to be fair, Madam Chair, because we are not proposing any new development at this time, the variances are related to the division of the lot only, and there's not essentially a lot of room to move that line. It's an existing condition. The lot widths are what they are. So when we prepared the R plan, now if there is a discussion about the future construction of that dwelling, the owner is open to discussing with with local residents. But in this case, the applications are what they are. They are simply to sever the lot. They are not related to the new construction. So,
Mr. Bodzik, it's getting late, so forgive me, but did you provide lotting evidence as part of your presentation or part of the materials?
lotting, you mean the draft R plan?
The lot fabric evidence?
We did not provide necessarily a breakdown of the lot fabric in the area. But I can ascertain that there are existing semi-detached dwellings within the R2C community along, I believe it is Rothsay and the property, yes, along Roth. Yes.
Just for the record, in future presentations to the committee, when you have a situation like this, because I'm looking at a map, and from the plan that I'm looking at, and it could be old, and that's the thing, is I can't necessarily rely on what I'm looking at because it's a circulation map. So we really do look for the lot fabric evidence to come from the consultants or the applicant or the agent or whomever. So, but from what I'm looking at, I can tell you that I'm not seeing any semi-detached or any of the near 9 meter frontages from this. So unless you have something to refute that, I kind of have to go by this.
I can ascertain that there are semi-detached dwellings in the area, but I do not have a map prepared showing the lot fabric and lot widths, no.
All right, okay. All right, moving on then to Aaron Smith. Ms. Manette, is Mr. Smith with us?
Hello, yeah.
Madam Chair, I do not see. Oh,
sorry.
Pardon me.
I apologize, Madam Chair and members. When I typed in my name, I thought that several of us would be working off the same computer. So I apologize. It's Aaron Smith and I'm at 3 Guilford Court.
All right, then, Mr. Smith.
I'll quickly go. Sorry.
I just wanted, so we've heard quite a bit already from Ms. McTurnan. So if you could just provide us with any new concerns that you may have.
Well, I'd like an opportunity to speak, and I'll speak quickly. Well, I might touch on some of the issues that she touched. I touch on them from a different angle. So
okay.
I may be permitted. Thank you. I'm speaking in opposition to the application. I and residents of Guilford Court question what constitutes a minor variance. The lot size at 10 Guilford Court is one of 6 lots that are larger than the remaining 12 lots on the court. While the variance related to 10 Guilford may be minor relative to stipulated width for severance, the concern is that the smaller sized lots will one day be considered wide enough for severance. The precedence of approving variance reduces the minimal accepted lot size. Future applications could cite the variance allowed at Guildford and request additional variance. This could potentially result in many more lots on Guildford Court to be severed. If this is not the case, and the minor variance requested for 10 Guildford is the minimum permitted, then it allows for a one-off dwelling that's considerably different than the other dwellings on the court in the neighborhood. Does this contribute to the urban intensification targets significantly enough to offset the negative consequences for the community? I argue the requested variance is too important to be considered minor. The extent of the impact on neighboring properties on the court and the community is significant. The accepted zoning height is 11 meters from ground level to the midway point between the eaves trough and roof peak. This is problematic for the community. The average house height on Guildford Court is 4.5 meters, and the zoning approved height is described as 11 meters. 2.5 times the height of the existing houses. The roof height of the proposed dwelling, given our conversations with the owner, could be 3.5 times the height of the existing houses. This dwelling will loom over other dwellings on the court. The proposed construction will impact the openness and spacing of the streetscape, and by encroaching into the side yards, create a windowless barrier effect to the neighbors on each side and behind. The dwelling will not be consistent with the character of the neighborhood given its foundation footprint and height profile. The proposed development is incompatible with the established build form and character of the neighborhood, and it will erode the aesthetics of the streetscape. In addition, the loss of sunlight, privacy, views, spacing due to setback encroachment on existing properties, and openness will result from the mass, height, and size of the proposed development. Considerations with respect to these issues have been mentioned by my neighbors, both Ms. McTurnan and by submission, and I share their concerns with respect to the adverse impacts of the proposed build. So the proposed severance will create 2 units. This will double the number of cars on this lot. This will also double potential overflow parking. If severance of lots occurs broadly in the community, parking and overflow parking will significantly increase in Glencairn, which diminishes safety and traffic flow. Traffic will be transformed and resemble the traffic congestion and noise and issues experienced on Stonehaven Drive and Bridlewood. Like the area near schools on Stonehaven Drive, Guildford Court is in a school zone. The arteries exiting and entering Glencairn are limited and close to schools, which only exacerbate traffic and safety issues in the community. I moved to Guildford Court in January 2020 because the neighborhood is aesthetically pleasing with large lot sizes and houses set back considerably from the road. Well, this is appealing to me. I would also argue is appealing to a majority of homeowners in the city. What is the long-term vision when deciding on community transformation? Is it simply to intensify without consideration for the quality of life and attractiveness of the area? The aesthetic form of the neighborhood should be considered to see whether it exhibits a reasonably uniform building period in style, design, scale, and spacing. Guildford Court and surrounding streets have a uniform building period in style and scale, and this requires protection. Any new development should be compatible and respect the established character of the neighborhood. I would suggest there are other areas of Glencairn and Canada that are more suited to such builds that would not disrupt the character of those communities. Furthermore, this severance and community transformation is not supported by transportation suitable for a community undergoing intensification. The LRT service will not reach Canada for another 10 years. Public transportation is woefully inadequate for Guildford Court and surrounding streets, as service in the area has been significantly reduced. This reduction in transportation service has pushed residents to commute, which is in traffic that intensification will only exacerbate. I argue the proposed severance is premature and not in the public interest. So legal doctrine, if I can just deviate a bit here, assumes the validity of the status quo and accordingly places a heavier burden of proof on the party seeking change. This means that an applicant requesting a change must demonstrate a stronger case than the persons objecting. I do not find the applicant has made a prima facie case that the variance satisfies good planning principles. In concluding, I would ask that my points with respect to transformation of the neighborhood and maintaining the uniform building style in the neighborhood, which is not what is being proposed, be addressed. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. I am going to make a couple of clarifying comments, though, to what you were saying. You've made some assumptions about the character of the new builds, of the massing of the new builds. You've essentially taken what the bylaw will allow and are assuming the worst of it. I've been on this committee for a long time, and I can tell you there's some really good architects out there. architects who can actually make infill development that fits with the surrounding neighborhood. Okay, so in this case, because it's just a lot area minor variance, we're not even into looking at any kind of development proposal here. It's not before us. It's not before us because they're not asking for height. They're not asking for setback, either side or rear or front. It's only when you get into those kinds of minor variances that you can start to look at a site plan and understand the footprint and get looking at elevations and that kind of thing. None of that is before us. And we can't make assumptions that the massing and the character of those new builds won't fit in, as much as they may not. We can't say that because, in fact, that's not before the committee at this particular point in time, and we can't make those assumptions. Especially knowing, as I said, that sometimes we've actually seen it work out really well. So, anything else? I took notes here. Question to Ms. Cully, if I could, please. If you could tell me what the frontage requirement is for a single family dwelling.
A single family detached dwelling, Madam Chair, would be 15 meters the lot width.
And that in that particular zone,
yes,
there's a drop from 15 to 9 for semi-detached. And just confirm to me, please, Ms. Cully, that semi-detached dwellings are a permitted residential form in this zone.
They are permitted, yes, Madam Chair.
Make some of those clarifications. Okay, great. I now have Ms. Toner.
Hi, Madam Chair.
Hello. So go ahead. I'm just going to ask you, like I've asked everybody, if you can not repeat some of the things that we've already heard, that would be great.
Hi, I'm sorry, it wasn't working there for a moment. I apologize. Can you hear me now? I can go ahead.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for taking my thoughts into consideration tonight. I as well cannot support this venture as I do not believe that it's in my community or the country's best interest. I know that this is in response to increased population within our city as well as our country, and we have to deal with this increased population in some way. However, I believe that we can achieve these intensification goals in other ways. We can, through developing existing multifamily neighborhoods, as well as redeveloping industrial lands. I do not believe that this process being applied to single family neighborhoods is in our best interest, and it's going to be met with opposition and public resistance. As we are trying to preserve our communities and protect the very reason that we purchased homes in this neighborhood. I understand the current zoning allows for semi-detached homes. However, if you examine the lot sizes in single or semi-detached homes, there is a difference of 1.5 and change meters, which is not even taking into consideration the variance requested. So we are changing the characteristics of the neighborhood by allowing this variance. And that's the same for other lots that have smaller single homes in the neighborhood. Also, if you examine the other lots on Guildford Court, that you're noticing that there's only 6 out of the 18 homes. So only 30% of the homes on our street will allow for this type of land severance. So you're going to have a block of 5 homes on one side. That's, if we allow this to happen, then I'm assuming it's going to set precedents for other lots to be severed. So not only is this a concern for us, but if this happens, then it's going to trickle effect throughout the street. So it's going to definitely change the characteristic and make room for other approvals of this type of severance. So I don't believe this street is the right street to allow for this. If allow for this type of change to occur, like I said, we're setting precedents, and it's only the beginning. And at what point do we say no? There are better options available that will benefit our communities in the long run. And if we wanted to be in a type of community with this type of intensification, we would have purchased in this type of community. Not only will this variance change our enjoyment, but it will change future generations of enjoyment in this type of community because they just won't exist. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Toner. Members of the committee, have you any questions for Ms. Toner? No? Okay, gonna move on. I have now two, Jordan Leblanc and Talisa Leblanc. Is there one of you that will speak for the household? Who's taking the lead? Okay, we don't hear you, Jordan. If you're speaking, you're not, we can't hear you. Jordan can't hear you. How about Talitha? I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Hi, yes, it is Talitha. I'm not sure. I guess Jordan's mic isn't working. I apologize if you hear kids in the background. We're on separate floors.
It's okay.
Is my audio okay?
Your audio is okay now, but we're going to go with your wife at this point.
Well, Jordan can go ahead. I may have, if possible, if there's one or two things we were going to touch on different things. So there may be one or two things I may want to add. Okay, I'll be really quick if that's okay after he's done.
All right. Okay, Jordan.
Okay.
You go.
Okay, great. I'm not going to rehash some of the arguments that have already been said. I mean, discussions about the character of the neighborhood definitely worth noting. In terms of the lot fabric you mentioned, if we look at Guildford, which is our street, and we look at Courtney, which is kind of the next street over, there are no semi-detached units on either of those streets. The closest semi-detached unit is on Old Colony, which is one of the main artery roads moving through Glencairn. The image is up on a screen now. This is to scale. It was originally, I just threw it together just to give people a sense as to what a house of this size would look like. I know that the height is not what we're talking about today. It was more to just get an idea of what a massive structure would look like and how much it would stand out on a house like this. If we just speak to the width thresholds that the city's already established, if developers are going to be creating a duplex in our neighborhood, it will stand out. It will be the only duplex on this street, on Davies Court, on Courtney. It'll be the only one. Therefore, my concern is really about the width of the lots and kind of what that's going to do in terms of future duplexes. Yeah, with that, I'll turn over if Talitha wanted to add anything extra.
Hi there. Sorry, I'm not sure. I'm not muted, right? There we go. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. So I echo the sentiments of pretty much all of our neighbors. You know, the aesthetic, how it fits in, it's huge. All of that. You know, I apologize. I was cutting things out as people were saying them because you wanted me. So, but something I did want to touch on is the impact on traffic of having. Of allowing a duplex to go in the first place, and then the fact that it does set a precedent and allow it to continue on. So as many of my neighbors have already said, you know, we picked this street specifically because it was quiet, it was a court, older, big neighborhood. The reason for us is because we have two young children who have severe autism. They don't understand danger. We specifically picked, we're in the back corner of the lot. The proposed build is across the street and over two houses. So I mean, it's visible, but we're in a corner in the back piece of the pie at the side. Our children don't understand danger. So we're always on high alert. There's always a concern about cars, vehicles. The more people that are on the street, the more cars. There's no busing nearby, really. You have to go over to Eagleson, so you have to travel by car. So you've got, so instead of one or two cars maybe coming in, now you've got 2, 4, maybe even 6, depending on how many vehicles you have per house. That for us severely impacts our quality of life because, as you can see, I have one here dying to play with our movies. For us, we're already, like I said, we're on high alert. You know, they don't understand danger, so they will dance off into the middle of the cul-de-sac. So when you've got a vehicle, you know, people use the cul-de-sac to turn around. So we're always watching. It's always a concern. But that concern is amplified exponentially when you start adding multiple vehicles. We start adding multiple more homes. And when we add one, let's say 4 doors down from there sells their house. Developer looks, says, hey, great, big lot, let's do it again. So now we're exponentially again, which means we lose the access of our front yard. We can't even be out there because there's too much of a risk that someone will come spinning around in the cul-de-sac at the last minute. It's already a risk, like I said, but it is amplified exponentially for us, which is we no longer have access to the front yard in a safe manner. So that's a huge one for us. The other impact I'd like to bring, because no one else has brought it up, is I don't know if there was a community neighborhood impact study done, but the other aspect of that would be an environmental impact study. The Carp River runs directly behind our house. It runs directly behind Ashley's house and Ms. McTurnan and Ms. Toner and Mr. Smith's house. Carp River goes directly behind all of our homes. We are all slightly also lower than the they're higher up. So any construction runoff just comes trailing down. We've got issues with drainage. We've already, anytime there's construction on Eagleson, it's already in the river. We see it all the time. Garbage stuff goes off the road. That becomes a whole issue. We already have issues with drainage in the area. It's part of the street floods. Glencairn's known for it. Part of the infrastructure, like they've been trying to fix it, but there's a flooding. We start adding double the houses, double the pressure. We've got more problems. Hi, baby. Yes, for a minute. So if there hasn't been an environmental impact study, if there hasn't been a community and neighborhood impact study, I would respectfully request that both of those be conducted prior to any consideration for approval even at this point to be able to move forward, because that is I know they've already demolished the house. There was runoff and problems even just from that minor amount of construction. There was already problems on this extra garbage, all of these things. Again, back to our personal situation. My son picks up garbage and he doesn't understand. So random bits of nails, all of that are in his mouth. So it just adds all of this, even just the construction aspect, adds a huge impact for us. Like we lose the front access of our home. We can't have them out. It's just not safe. And I think pretty much all of the other things I was going to say kind of have already been touched on. So I don't really want to take up too much more of your time. So I'm not being pulled. So I appreciate it. And thank you very much for letting me speak. And thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your time, honestly, for everyone. Okay, so that was the end of my speakers list. I'm going to make a call out there, though, to see if there's anybody else who we don't have who would like to speak. I see there's, it says owner, so please unmute and give us your name and your municipal address, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Michael Adam. I live at 13 Guilford Court. I'm sorry I wasn't on right at the beginning, but
okay.
I'm new to this whole Zoom thing.
All right, yes, because we did call your name and moved on our list. Yes. So go ahead, Mr. Adam.
So I just, again, I'm not going to repeat what the others said. I am very much opposed to this. My wife and I have been living here for the past 21 years. This is where we planned on retiring. So other than to say we like the community the way it is, we don't want it to change. And I do fear that if the applications go ahead, it will definitely set a precedent, and it will happen to other properties because who knows, the neighbor next door to the new development may decide that the house is too tall and they will move away and another developer will move in. So I just want to go on the record as to say that we are opposed to this, and thank you for your time, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Adam. Okay, the last call out there. Anyone else who'd like to come forward to speak either for or against the application? Okay, I am not seeing anybody else. So we're going to close the public portion. And when I say we're going to close the public portion, that means that now the discussion is between the committee members and Mr. Budzik in order to be sure that we have complete clarity going into our deliberations. So Mr. Budzik, I'm going to give you another couple minutes to recap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to reiterate your position that semi-detached dwellings are permitted within the R2C zone. And so therefore there is no zoning deficiency or issue with regards to the proposed use. The only variance being sought is related to the lot widths. So I did hear some concerns about the potential height of the building. I would just like to note that whether it is a single large detached dwelling on the existing lot or a semi-detached dwelling as we are proposing, any impacts related to privacy and overlook or height are the same, and therefore that those impacts are related to the built form of the structure and unrelated to the variances that we are proposing at this time. So the fact that you can build an 11-meter tall dwelling is not necessarily relevant to the proposed applications, although I can certainly understand the concerns from neighbors. In addition to that, I would just like to note, I did hear some mention of the proposed dwelling encroaching into the required setbacks. I would just like to affirm that the owner is committed to proposing the owner is committed to developing the lot in accordance with the zoning, and we are not seeking any additional variances for that development. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bunsick. Okay, committee, I think we've heard a lot of evidence this evening. Given certainly I have more clarity about the nature of the applications and the 4 tests under the Planning Act. So I'm going to look for the vote first on the consent application. All those in favor? All right. I am dissenting on the consent application as I do not feel that it is minor in nature. So, so for the record, Ms. Willis and Mr. Hindle are in support, but the way it works, majority rules. So the application is granted. On the minor variance, all those in favor? All right, same thing. I'm dissenting on this. But again, majority rules. So so the application passes and the minor variance is granted. So, all right, so that's where we're at this evening. So Mr. Bolduc, you're aware of all of the conditions that are listed. Any questions?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, okay. In that case, I think that completes our evening. I wanted to especially thank the residents. It's always good for panel members to hear directly from you, to hear how you see the proposal, what your experience has been. And I know it's late and some of you have young children, so thank you for taking the time to speak to us this evening. It's truly appreciated. Thank you. All right, and I think that brings us to our last application for the evening, which is for 2865 Walkley Road. Looking for, let's see, Mr. Price, I believe. No, good evening, Mr. Price.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the
All right.
committee, Rod Price.
Need to read something to you.
Yeah.
All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted first at the property to which the application applies, secondly, for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, and thirdly, that the sign was clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time? Do you either swear or affirm that to be true?
I swear to be true.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, I am going to ask you for a presentation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Just some formalities. Rod Price, Wartar Land Development Consultants, on behalf of the owners of what is known municipally as 2865 Walkley Road, part of an abandoned rail corridor. If you may recall, there were a few other applications earlier, well, I guess late 2020, to sever lots throughout the corridor for the purposes of adding them to abutting neighbors. And we're here before you with a couple more in order to transfer or potentially convey part 1 to the abutting landowners on Lancaster, along with parts 2 and 3. Similar to the previous applications that were approved by committee, we have included the access easement. There were concerns previously, you may recall, in the previous applications about having access for maintenance or what have you. So we've continued those easements along to maintain consistency. As I'm sure you can recall, these abandoned rail corridors are tricky in terms of getting them to the abutting owners. And so as we proceed, we'll now be down to just parts 4 and 5 throughout that corridor, with which negotiations continue with the abutting owners. Pretty straightforward. I've gone through staff's conditions. Similar to the previous applications, we believe that condition 1 should be removed as well, till such time that the lands are developed through a site plan process. If they are at all, there should not be any logical reason for grading and drainage plans at this time. Happy to answer any questions should committee have them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price. Questions? Mr. Hendo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A question for you. I know about the easements from the previous application. Can you tell me what the language in that easement states? Because I think originally it was set up not necessarily to include this parcel, or can you just fill me in on what that language is?
In terms of what the language in the easement agreements will be?
Yeah, because I want to make sure that the easement that was set up through the previous application provides access for
Yes.
property beyond what was part of that previous application.
Yeah, 100%. That's the intent, is that from, if you recall, there's that small bulb at the end of Sheffield Road where the frontage was originally. Those easements will allow unfettered access all the way down to the end of the remaining corridor, which has been carved up in the draft R plan. Was not included in part 1 because that's the end of the line, so to speak, of this rail. But parts 3 and 5 will continue the same easement, access easement that was previously granted. Now, that being said, whether there's a need for it any longer, given that the lots are all starting to be conveyed to abutting owners, we did maintain those easements because there's that one chunk in part 4 and 5 that negotiations are continuing. So we just wanted to make it consistent throughout that course so that there wasn't any confusion.
Okay, no, that's great. No, I think it's the lawyer in me is being very specific that the language of the easement on the other parcels that these parcels are taking advantage of, the language of the previous easement does allow for access to these other properties that were outside of that original approval.
Understood. Yeah, that's the intent for sure. Yes.
So it's very permissively worded effectively, which makes everything hunky dory.
Yeah, understood. And that was the intent of including, even though they probably wouldn't be needed all the way down the end of the line, we did include them just for those purposes, just for clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Maybe I have a question for Ms. Ramirez. I noticed in the staff report, there was talk about stipulated consents and some concerns that some lot additions have not materialized. Can you give me a little more context on the concern with that one?
Yes, so in preparing for this report, I looked at the other consents that had happened, and it appeared that the land, I checked the ownership of the lots, and it appeared that the conveyance did not actually occur to 2880 Sheffield, and that was one of the concerns that staff had identified in the previous severance, that should all the lot additions not materialize, then we would have these isolated undevelopable parcels. And staff still has that concern. And actually, I discussed this application, the easements, ahead of meeting with the Deputy Secretary Treasurer. And my understanding was that those easements for the retained parcels, that when the application went to committee in December, there was easements that were created for that retained land, which was part 1 through 10 on that draft R plan. But now the owner is proposing to create further easements to break up that, to provide that access. But after discussing with the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, it doesn't appear that they can actually create an easement over part 5, because there's no consent application to deal with that.
There's no consent application for part 5, you mean?
So the consent application is for part 2 and 3 to convey it to the budding landowner. And so they're creating 2 remnant parcels, and they're proposing to do a lot addition for part 1 to be adjacent parcel. However, there's no consent application for part 4 and 5. It's going to be a remnant. And so after discussing it further with the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, they cannot create that easement to continue that right of way for those remnant parcels, because that land is not the subject of its own separate consent application. And so I was under the impression that because the entire piece was coming in, we could continue those easements. But my understanding after talking with Deputy Secretary Treasurer Brenning is that actually can't, that easement on part, I'll say it's part 5, that can't actually be created at this point to continue those easements. And should the lot additions all materialize, then there is no need for that easement. But as staff has expressed, we have concerns that perhaps not all of those lot additions will materialize, as was the case where the land was not conveyed to the abutting owner for 2880 Sheffield.
Right. Okay. So I see what you mean. So in this case, we are doing a severance just for parts 2 and 3, parts 1, 4, and 5. They're not really things, they just become, but 4 and 5 won't be created as individual parcels because we're not doing a severance specifically on those parcels. We're doing it as they will be remnants. So effectively you'll have parts 2, 3, and then 1 is a remnant and 4 and 5 are a remnant, but those individual pieces won't be dealt with. So if we were to do an easement, it would either have to be a blanket over the remnant, or we'd have to amend the application. Is that makes sense?
I'll let Deputy Secretary Brenning speak to the solutions, but my understanding is that either, as you said, it could be a blanket, or you would have to, the applicant would have to file an application for that remnant piece to create that easement, because right now it currently doesn't exist. It's a part on an R plan, but that easement hasn't been created.
Right. Okay. Maybe we should hear from Ms. Brenning to see kind of what her solutions.
Through you, Madam Chair, we did discuss this when we were looking at the proposal, and I think I think the end result was that 2 and 3 would be conveyed to 2713, thereby the need to and therefore it gives it its frontage. So basically the easement is really not required because the frontage therefore goes to those properties. Let me just get my report. So the frontage would go to those properties. So basically, and the same with part 1. So the easement, the access is through that street onto, let's get my report here. Pardon me for a sec to get to this page. I believe it is to the properties on Lancaster.
Yes, if I can assist a little bit here. Yeah, so it would be to 2713 Lancaster and 2655 Lancaster. Again, we included the potential easement should committee wish to impose them. I may offer that the easement over part 3 would not be required, because I think this is where you're going, is that parts 2 and 3 would go to the abutting owner. Part 1 doesn't need the easement. Therefore, by virtue of that, part 5 wouldn't really be required as an easement, because that would be the end where the other access easements would end.
Correct, yes. So then in effect, part 4 and 5 does become the end parcel, if that makes sense. And I
Part 4 and
believe
5 would become what is now currently part 1.
part 1. So therefore, and if I'm understanding the evidence, the easements that were already granted lead to that part 4 and 5.
Okay, so if I think about this, so part 1 would get its access via parts 2 and 3 that have access to the road. And then parts 4 and 5 would have access via the easement provided through previous consents.
That's my understanding. If Mr. Price can confirm that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
we just included the easements on the plan just to be consistent with the previous applications, but in my opinion, that's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think I get the process. Yeah, so that makes sense. You don't even necessarily need a parts 2 and 3. That can just be as a single parcel. However, we would need an easement across parts 2, 3, and then whatever the existing property that the lot addition is going to grant access for part 1 for access via the existing property or the amended property that includes parts 2 and 3 to have access to the Lancaster.
Yeah.
Okay. It's messy, but it works.
I know, and
I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm
keep going
lost
through
on
these
this
rail
one, right?
corridors the last few months. I appreciate your patience with them.
Yeah, you're not making our lives easy, Mr.
Oh man, I wish I had the one before where it was just the simple severance where neighbors were yelling at me. That's easier.
All I can say is, I'm a planner. I need my colors on my map so that I can follow along here. So it's missing to me. As well as
I'm a bit confused by this. First of all, the previous applications where we had a similar debate and we imposed the easement condition originally immediately abuts this to the sort of the southwest, correct? It's right beside part 4 is part of the old application, the previous application.
Correct.
Okay, so in this case, the easements, I understand going through the thought process about why they might not be required on parts 1 and 3, but in the event part 1, the transaction does not close, are we then left with a landlocked parcel that would have no access? Oh no, I guess it could get and we don't convey the easement on part 3, then part 1 becomes landlocked if the transaction doesn't close. Is that correct?
So I think in this case, what would have to happen, I think you're correct. What we would have to do is provide an easement, not through part, at the very least, part 3, and then the 2713 Lancaster property that's outside of this reference plan. So that they had access to a roadway of some description. And or provide an easement through part 3 and then a blanket easement against parts 4 and 5 that effectively won't exist because they'll just be a remnant parcel that gives them access all the way down through the other easements. Either works.
Yeah, now I can confirm there are purchase and sale agreements in place both with parts 1 and parts 2 and 3. So I don't envision that being the case, but until it's closed and conveyed, I understand where Ms. Willis is going.
So what happened with the 2880 Sheffield Road? I wish, do you happen to have an overall picture that shows?
I don't, but I know the deal is in place. It just hasn't closed yet.
Okay, so it's not a dead deal.
No.
And does that then mean that there are no remnant pieces left, putting the two sets of applications together, save and accept parts 4 and 5. That's the only remnant piece that's remaining.
That's correct.
And what's right to the far, I would say, northwest of part 1?
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the air photo.
So
North and west of part 1.
Looks like an extension of the rail corridor, but I think this is the terminus.
That's just the terminus of the ownership. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same problem, the same issue exists as you go further off the page. It's just not under the ownership of your foreman.
It'll be somebody else's problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Or somebody else's
Some other
challenge.
panel of this committee.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay. I think I understand. Actually, just a follow-up question to staff. I understand the idea of a undeveloped parcels being created, undevelopable parcels unless they get conveyed to the adjacent landowners. But if you had your way in terms of the approval of these applications, what would you like to see? I think we had the same discussion for the first series of these, that it's my view that it's a bad situation now and we're just trying to improve it. And as we reduce the amount of land that is potentially landlocked and undevelopable, we're actually improving the situation. But I'm just a bit curious as to what staff would like to see happen here.
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, staff's preference is to see all of the parcels added to adjacent parcels so that there is no remnant parcels without that are on their own.
So all the transactions would basically close the same day, and it's all, I mean, that, yeah, okay. Okay, I think that would be nice, but believe me, you know what land assemblies and trying to dispose these is an absolute nightmare. It got me out of land development, actually. So I understand, thank you.
Okay. I think that's a lot of clarifying questions. I don't believe there was any speakers, but I don't think I've made the call out to the public yet. Don't see anybody out there, but is there anyone who has an interest in this application, either for or against? Now's your chance to come forward. All right, Ms. Manette, are we on our own? Are we it? Oh, I think so.
That's
Mr. Price.
right, Madam Chair. There's no one left.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, before you kick it to a vote, there still is the question about whether or not, similar to the previous severances granted along this corridor, the staff condition that was included in the report regarding grading and drainage plans being required. Hopefully we can be consistent with the previous decisions that those technical issues can be dealt with when those parcels of land have been conveyed and developed.
Which condition are you talking about specifically?
Condition one.
All right. All right, thoughts from Ms. Willis and Mr. Handel, please.
I actually understand what the condition could mean. It's simply to achieve positive drainage, and there's not going to be ponding or anything on the site. I remember we had a lengthy discussion about it the last time and we let it go, and I think it's appropriate to do the same thing here.
All right, Mr. Handel, do you concur?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Record, we're going to delete condition number 1. Before we go to a vote, still the housekeeping amendments haven't been made yet. So I see on the legal description, we are parts of lots 24 and 25, concession 3, Ottawa Front, and parts 1 to 10 on 4R 33-542. And in the zoning, we have an IH and IL, and we're striking the exception 263. And I think that's it. Okay. Okay, sorry, Ms. Romero.
Are we, just to clarify, are we then not requiring an access easement based on the mental gymnastics that Scott did for us?
So I think for me, I wanted to clarify that as well. I think we need an easement one way or the other. And there's a couple of different ways that we can do it. And I'm open to Mr. Price's preferences in this case. So either we need an easement across part 3 and then an easement against the remnant parcel parts 4 and 5 to get access all the way across for part 1. Or we need an easement like parts 4 and 5, they can be on their own, and we do an easement from part 1 through likely part 3, but then also through I guess it's 2713 Lancaster to get access to the roadway. But for the latter, we don't have a reference plan, so at this stage, I would suggest it would have to be a blanket.
To be honest with you, Mr. Hindle, I think that's the only way to go personally. Go ahead, Mr. Price.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with you. Sorry for jumping in and out of protocol, but yeah, that's probably the easiest way, or just a condition that states that easements will be granted to provide access to parts 1 and parts 2 and 3. And whether it's done through a 6 meter or a blanket, we'll deal with that through instead of trying to pick one way or the other. I think we just if you can condition it where it's open, we'll work with our surveyor to ensure that that occurs, and our lawyer.
All right.
Okay.
Ms. Ramirez, I see that your hand is up.
Yes, Madam Chair, a few things. There were some other.
And here. Sorry, Ms. Ramirez, we're having some difficulty hearing you.
Oh, okay. There were some other minor changes to the notice that also needed to be made to the numbers. For the vacant parcel, there was a 4 when it needed to be an 8. And then also parts 4 and 5, the lot area was 10,195.7 meters. And technically, the parcel doesn't have a lot width because it doesn't have bound or lot lines as we understand them. So I crossed out that section. Also, my understanding is that we do not, can't condition the creation of easements. I know that that has sometimes been a practice, but we should deal with the easements as part of the decision and not as a condition of the decision.
Okay, it is messy. It is messy
Can
again.
we not word it that it's to provide access, whether it's by easement right away, blanket easement, leaves it open to find a solution to get it there.
I'm very confused about, I guess it shows. The requirement for part 1, if in the event that part 1 doesn't close first, having an easement for via part 3 across 2713 out to the road, how does Mr. Price, how do you know, Mr. Price, that the owner of 2713 is going to agree to that?
I can't. That's what I mean. That's why I'm trying to go towards the provision of access over lot parts 4 or 5, one way or the other, whether that's the access easement as before or a blanket easement as Mr. Hindle has alluded to, that we get people to parts 2 and 3 one way or another.
And that's only required in the event that part 1 does not, the transaction conveying part 1 to 2653 does not occur first.
Correct.
And I don't know the lay of the land. Like, I'm just wondering, is there I mean, conveying parts 2 and 3 to 2713 means that they would be incorporating their overall parcel, but is there a place where there could physically be access across to get from part 2 out to Sheffield Road?
Is there,
is it physically possible to get from parts 2 and 3 out across 2713 based on the layout of the building and that sort of thing to get out to Sheffield Road?
Yeah,
I don't think we're really in a position to.
Well, I don't know.
I know.
The properties that these proposed parts would be added to are just going to be added to, and if the owners decide they want to redevelop it, then they'll have to go through those exercises as to what. But in terms of pure access to get down to the end of Sheffield, Yes, if you're in part 1, you can go across the easement, which would be identified as part 3, across a blanket, which would be 4 and 5, and then take the easement that was created with the previous severance to that little bulb, which really is doesn't have an actual vehicular access physically to get to, but legally can. The concern was if the city mandated the owners to go and clear trees or obnoxious weeds, how do you get to it?
Yeah.
There's no development opportunity other than the way we are trying to carve this up and convey it to owners and picking away at it with the clients. If part 1 doesn't go, then you've got the proposed access over parts 2, and whether it's a blanket easement over 4 and 5, that can be dealt with. I'm not concerned about providing access. Whether you want to condition it, and Mr. Hindle being specific, it's difficult when you've got so many different moving parts. But to get access to part 1, should it not close, can be achieved by that access easement over part 3, and probably a blanket easement over parts 4 and 5. That's how you get them there. Asking for an easement to go over one of the parcels that has not been conveyed to and is a separate owner based on the ownership, the way it's structured, I think that's the cleanest way.
Did we not hear that we cannot condition an easement over 4 and 5 because it's not part of the application?
We can give a blanket easement.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ramirez, I see you've been waiting patiently. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My understanding, backing up a bit, would be that severance is.
Sorry, we're having trouble hearing you again, Ms. Ramirez.
Sorry, the severance is for parts 2 and 3, so that is the first part that is going to. No,
I'm still not hearing you.
I'm going to turn off my video in the hopes that might speed up my.
Better. Okay, that's better. It is better.
Okay, so my understanding is that parts 2 and 3 have to go first in terms of being conveyed.
Okay, so Ms. Ramirez, can we try again? Because we're still not catching, unless it's just me, but
No, I can't hear.
Okay. Parts 2 and 3 on the draft R plan, those are what is the subject of the consent application. So those will have to be conveyed prior to part 1 being conveyed to the adjacent owner. So that will have to go first, the part 2 and the 3. My understanding is also that we cannot create a blanket easement over part 4 and 5 because that is not its own separate consent application. I'd ask the Deputy Secretary Treasurer to confirm that, but my understanding after our discussion was that you cannot create an easement over that parcel because there's no separate consent application dealing with that parcel. It is a remnant.
All right. So we spend hours talking about these applications, and Mr. Price, part of me is frustrated because a lot of us have been in this game for a long time, and we can't seem to have a clear picture here on some of this. So I'm going to put out a motion for an adjournment to get clarity about how all of these moving pieces are going to. So what needs to happen in order to ensure that over time we can maintain access in the way that planning staff has provided. So I'm recommending an adjournment. In fact, I don't know how you can pull this together in 2 weeks, but to the next meeting, which would be Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer, would be August.
It is August 4th, Madam Chair.
I'm moving a motion to adjourn this application to August 4th with the hopes that we can get the information we need and a sequence of things with the easements and the access and what is it that we're actually doing, because I don't feel very comfortable with all of this. I'm not any clearer than I was. So all those in favor? All right, we are adjourning to the next meeting. Mr. Price.
Can I just ask a question so I understand this a little better? Is the reason that we cannot, I'm not trying to backtrack on what we just did. I just want to understand the reason that aren't parts 4 and 5, did they not become the retained parcel? And if they do, why can't a condition be imposed on a retained parcel for an easement?
Oh, no,
Or is
there's
it
a
because-
debate we've had over and over about conditions on retained parcels.
And it was determined by the city solicitor that we can impose on retained parcels. We had that debate at our last committee of the whole meeting. And I'm just wondering whether the whole problem is because these are these lot line adjustments rather than severance of parts 1 and 2 from the overall piece, which means part 4 stays as a remnant, as the retained parcel, and we apply the condition to it. I mean, this would all have to be resolved before we hear it again, but I just don't quite understand the reason why it's so difficult.
I agree as well. So I don't quite understand myself why it's so difficult because, you know, like I said, we've been in this for a while and for whatever reasons, we can't seem to be wrapping our minds around this. And all I'm thinking is we need a sequence of events. I want to see parts. I want to see how the whole thing is supposed to roll through so that in fact, we're keeping some integrity and access, whether it's an easement or it's actual frontage. And I don't see that in any clarity right now. Ms. Ramirez, I see you have your hand up.
I just wanted to note that I was under the impression that an easement could be created over that retained parcel, but after my conversation with the Deputy Secretary Treasurer, I'm not under that same understanding now.
Yeah, and just to be clear on that, there is no application for part 4 and 5. It's only for 2 and 3. So the committee, to my understanding, can't create an easement over a piece of remnant lands. But if there was other discussion at the committee of the whole, where there was legal advice to the contrary, I'm not
There's
aware
a
of that.
distinction here. There's a big distinction
Is it
here.
not the retained
In one
parcel?
case, sorry, just let me finish this up because the big distinction I'm seeing is in the applications where we were told that you could put something on a retained parcel, the retained parcel forms part and parcel of the overall application. It forms part of the picture. In this case, I think we're hearing that those 2 parts are actually not part of this application. They're not part of the picture. So even though we're calling them the remnant or retained, from an application standpoint, they're not the retained parcels. They're just parcels in abeyance that we haven't dealt with and that we don't have an application to deal with. Am I right about that?
No. You can't sever 2 pieces from an existing piece and not it becomes its own parcel. It becomes the retained parcel.
I know, but I guess the point here though is that we can't put a condition on a parcel that's dangling, that yes, it's there. I agree, but it's not part of an application process that gives us the jurisdiction or authority to actually impose anything.
We've done it many times.
If
yeah, that's strangely restrictive. To me, you're dealing with the parcel as a whole, and then a portion of it is being severed off. But the application pertains to the entire parcel. Like we do the circulation based on the entire parcel, not just on parts 2 and 3.
Okay, if that's, you know what, this is all the more reason to get some clarity, right?
So as far as a blanket easement, my understanding is we could register a blanket easement over 4 and 5. Because we're not creating a specific part on a retained or a remnant parcel of land.
Yeah, that's what we had talked about. Because parts 4 and 5 wouldn't be created. They're not part of the application, but the combined parcel, that parts 4 and 5, would be a parcel that you could
put a blanket easement over
across that. Yeah, that's what I talked about.
Correct. And I'm still not sure why we need an easement over part 1, or it used to be the old part 1 and 2.
So we don't need over 1.
We don't need it over 1, which is the end piece. if I'm
You
understanding
need to
that.
but you need to get one. People to or from one. You have to get them there somehow. So either they have to go through part 3 and then through the combined parts 4 and 5 to the existing easement off to the right of the plan, or you have to go through part 3 and down to 2713. Which if there's a reference plan, you can that already exists, you can use a smaller piece, but otherwise you'd have to do a blanket of 2713 to get people down to Lancaster.
And to me, that would have been, I'm not sure, maybe because I've been struggling with it or dealing with this for a while, that it wasn't complicated at all, because you don't need an easement. You really only need the easement, which is part 3, which has been identified. Parts 4 and 5, you know, as long as you provide access to part 3 somehow, that's all we need to do. And a blanket easement achieves that, but.
I actually don't see the difference in terms of our ability to impose a condition between imposing a blanket easement or an actual easement on a reference plan. I don't think it makes any difference. So I don't think that's the issue. It's just whether or not we can put a condition on the retained parcel, and we've done it it's happened to me as an applicant in the past.
Yes.
But I think it still warrants clarification.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, weirdly, in this case, I would actually be okay to proceed on with just a blanket on 4 and 5. But if you guys still want to take the time, let's do that.
The other, if I could through the chair, a blanket easement would not be a condition. They can just go ahead and register that on their own. It wouldn't be a condition of the committee's approval.
Why can't it be a condition?
We could. It doesn't need.
Well, if we can't then approve it until it's already conveyed, because we have no control over it.
All right, so Mr. Price, you're going to come back to us in a couple of weeks, and you're going to provide us with the options and with some advice about which way to best deal with this outside of a new application, to be very clear. I mean, I think what we're saying is perhaps an application to deal with 4 and 5 would actually make all of this even a little bit clearer in terms of what our jurisdiction is and our authorities. With regards to conditions, there wouldn't be any questions, but I'm going to leave that to you. But I do think that what we need is to have a clearer understanding of the varying options, and I guess I don't know how better to do it. I mean, I see your survey plan. Maybe you can mark up a survey plan with in some way to actually, you know, better demonstrate the easements and the accesses, because, or in the options, I guess it's the options on top of that.
Okay.
All right, let's do that, because right now, and I think Ms. Brenning, if you could, let's find out what the rules are a little bit more clearly, like on the consent. So I'd really like to understand whether in this case we would have the authority or not. Like, that's not even that clear to me anymore. I think we've been back and forth a couple of times and waffled on it. So let's get a lot of clarity about what our authority actually is in regards to that. I think it's important in this case. All right. Thank you very much, all, and thank you, Mr. Price. I know you probably know this by the back of your hand, and we're trying to cozy up with it, because if there's one thing that we kind of do not want to do is create a situation that makes, like, and I agree with Ms. Willis to a certain extent. It looks like we're going in the right direction. Just want to make sure that we're doing it right, so that
we are at the end of the line. It's anyway, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right, thanks so much, and thank you so much to staff. I forgot to just to welcome you at the beginning, but again, we do appreciate everything you do for us. It's the middle of the summer and you're still here. Yay. And
Sure.
And it's the same to Ms. Ramirez, Ms. Young, Ms. Cully. Thanks for hanging in, Ms. Manette. I take it Cheryl